Story 1.
Husband takes down cheating wife's lovers one by one, then disappears from their lives forever. Steve Johnson stationed himself outside his wife's office at 7:000 p.m., intending to terminate the charade they dubbed marriage. Some husbands overlooked the signs over time, especially when their wives had never worked late before. Steve took notice and decided to address the issue. He approximated that this had been transpiring for 2 months, pinpointing the moment he observed his wife Angela wearing red high-heeled shoes to work. Angela despised heels, reserving them for rare weddings or special occasions, particularly in the bedroom, where she paired them with red heels, white stockings, a cute lace bra, and thong underwear. Steve cherished the white thigh-high stockings and believed they had a fantastic love life. However, Angela never wore high heels to work, which prompted Steve to inquire about the change. He asked if something was going on, and she explained that she had a meeting with her boss and wanted to look professional. Angela paused briefly and continued walking without turning around. Steve remained silent, contemplating her choice and wondering if it resembled that of a professional yet remained discreet. The revelation unfolded over time. Initially, it was an occasional hour, but later it escalated to 2 or 3 hours several days a week. Steve realized the truth when Angela attended a bachelorette party. Detesting clubs, salons, and bars, preferring dinner or coffee, she disapproved of drinking and looked down on those who indulged. Following her to a third bachelorette party at her boss Martin Schindler's house in Glen Ellen, Steve recognized the location from past gatherings. Waiting an hour to confirm her intentions, he then deflated all 4 tires and returned home. Angela omitted the tire incident but recounted it to their daughter Jenny, expressing relief that someone merely released the air. Jenny questioned its veracity and Angela affirmed, grateful they weren't cut. Using an air pump, Steve insisted she keep it in the trunk. Angela admitted to a night at a dance club with friends and suggested avoiding it in the future. Steve consulted a lawyer, initiating the divorce process, leading him to sit in his car near her office, awaiting her impending service. Despite lamenting 21 years of marriage, they produced their 17-year-old daughter, Jenny, Steve's pride and joy. They initially met when Angela, a receptionist aspiring to become a paralegal, assisted Steve with a contract dispute. Dating blissfully for 2 years, they married, and Steve believed in the happiness of their marriage until Angela started working for Martin Schindler. Despite Steve's truck-driving job with long hours, they maximized family time, embarking on weekend trips according to Jenny's schedule, filled with sports or other engaging activities. They explored Galena, Illinois for wineries, and Lake Geneva, Wisconsin for shopping and relaxation. Angela's betrayal, unnoticed until the revelation of her choice in footwear, severed their connection as Angela distanced herself. Steve, previously unaware of her infidelity, observed a decline in her demeanor. He recalled the night he trailed her and initiated a conversation. "Why not have dinner and catch a movie today? I have a rare day off on Friday and I'd like to spend time with you," he proposed. She replied, "You know the deal. Fridays are for my girls. They depend on me as their designated driver. Let them manage for one night. With your extended work hours and those nights with the girls, I barely see you. If you had a genuine job that didn't require driving at all hours, we could spend more time together. But you don't. I've endured it for 2 decades. Deal with it. See you later." Without saying goodbye, she left, leaving him speechless. Following her into the garage, he witnessed her departure, grabbed the keys, and hastily followed. Their area had a single exit, involving a maze of streets to reach the exit of their house. Catching up with her on Main Street, he trailed her to Martin's house. He avoided her for the rest of the weekend, deciding to consult a lawyer on Monday. He wasn't seeking a scorched earth approach. He simply wanted a peaceful end to their marriage, feeling through her words and actions that she no longer desired him. He questioned, holding on to the slippery rope. He believed she could have her boss without a fight on his part. He shared this sentiment with his daughter that Monday, disclosing that she was involved with her boss and expressing his belief that she was cheating on him. His daughter, referring to him as Pumpkin, acknowledged the information, stating that she may not have noticed a difference in the last couple of months, but he did. "No way, Daddy, I don't believe it. I followed her to his house. She claimed she was going out with friends, but that's not true. She went straight to her boss's house. But her tires were damaged at the club. No, honey, I did it right outside her boyfriend's house when I realized she wasn't heading to the club." "It's hard to believe, Dad." "Me too, but it's true." His daughter sat beside him in the car, anticipating the inevitable fireworks. "Are you sure, Dad? No chance?" Jenny asked. "No, Pumpkin. It's over. She broke my trust and tore my heart." I can't tolerate such betrayal, even if she had a reason. There's no justification for a prolonged affair. What if she got drunk, and it happened just once? Maybe if she'd been assaulted, it would be different. No, she chose this path. She betrayed my trust. Trust is crucial. You can never love someone you can't trust. I could never love someone who betrayed me like that. Our marriage fell apart. Jenny glimpsed two men approaching the car from the window. What a fool, Angela Johnson remarked, looking out of their law office window, engaged with Martin. She was relieved the office had gold-tinted windows. I can't believe it. He thought he'd smack me to it. There was no love there. It was animalistic in every way. It took him 6 months to attract Angela, grooming her to replace his wife, who just finalized their 19-year marriage's divorce. He was fed up with his ex-wife's complaints, weight gain, and lack of desire. Embarrassed to be seen with her, he finally broke free when his twins left for college. Angela, the same age as his wife, exuded greater elegance, possessing the toned physique of a 30-year-old. She radiated astonishing beauty. Martin had already upgraded her wardrobe, envisioning her as an exemplary boss's wife. A knock on the window startled Steve. Are you Stephen Johnson? Rolling down the window, he confirmed. Yes. You've been served. Please read the documents carefully. There is a restraining order requiring you to stay 100 meters away from Angela Johnson, Jennifer Johnson, and your family residence. What? An injunction from Jenny. Jenny grabbed the envelope, reading the divorce headline. She discovered a restraining order and handed it to him. What the hell? He shouted. Oh God, no, Jenny moaned. Daddy, I swear I didn't know. What are you talking about? She handed him the remaining papers. The document outlined several allegations: spousal violence, child misuse, aggravation of a minor. Jenny, why? Dad, I swear I had nothing to do with this. This is a lie or a mistake. Wait, how did she know I'd be here right now? That's because I told her. His daughter's admission shattered his heart. When you told me she was cheating on you, I confronted her. She told me she only did it because she had an investigator's report stating you cheated on her. You can't be serious. Can you? Have you seen the report? No. You believed her and not me. Did you let her set me up? Baby, why? I love you so much. Why did you do this to me? I asked you not to say anything. I swear, Dad, I didn't know about the restraining order. This misuse is nonsense. I swear I didn't say anything like that to anyone. He cried quietly, not paying attention to her pleas. A moment later, he said, You have to leave now, Jenny. I can't, and don't want to, be within 100 yards of you anymore, he said quietly. Dad, no, she screamed. Go, or I might get arrested on top of all this. The sheriff is still here watching me. Reading further, he said, Oh my God, they also froze all my accounts. Crap, what should I do now? Congratulations to you both. You destroyed me. I can't even afford to fight her damn powerful law firm with all these bogus claims. I will forever fight in court. Oh God, no. I'll fix everything, Daddy, she said, getting out of the car and heading toward the office building. Martin and Angela concluded their activities and sighed contentedly. It was great, darling, she said. I just wish I had binoculars so I could see his face. As Martin fastened his belt and Angela smoothed out her dress, Jenny stormed into the office screaming, You're a witch! Child misuse, aggravation. What is wrong with you? Jenny screamed. I should have had the advantage, Angela said. I should have struck first. Now he cannot enter the house or access our money for some time. Now I have the upper hand over him. He didn't insult me. I don't know this for sure. You guys are really close, Angela said with a grin. Jenny approached her and asked, He didn't cheat, did he? Of course not. Who needs it? She said with a laugh. You're a monster, Jenny said, and punched her mother in the face with all her might. Angela collapsed to the ground in shock and pain. Martin laughed and said, Nice shot, girl. Jenny froze, then looked around. She saw bookcases, shelves, and a dirty desk. She grimaced in disgust, looked at Martin, and swept everything off the table. Then Jenny looked at him and calmly said, You better never cross paths with me again, idiot. I can and will hurt you. And she left. Jenny, wait. Damn it, Angela screamed. Martin said, That little brat will pay for this. On her way out, she passed a man with an envelope in his hand who asked her, Are you Angela Johnson? There, she said, and rushed away. Both Angela and Martin laughed at the fact that she was served with Steve's divorce petition. Jenny desperately tried to talk to her father out of fear. He knew he couldn't talk to her, so he didn't answer and cried every time he saw her call. He was afraid that Angela would find out and send the police after him for violating the restraining order. Angela had already alienated him from all their friends, and only his parents and brother believed in his innocence. His sister-in-law kept him away from his niece and nephew, just in case it was true. This almost shattered her brother's marriage with George before Jenny compelled her to reveal the truth. He couldn't fathom what he'd done to merit such animosity from Angela and the betrayal of his daughter. Even without knowledge of the misuse charge, she informed her mother that he was aware of her affair and the impending service. She falsely claimed she intended to stand by him during Angela's service but stayed silent, knowing he would be served. Jenny sought assistance for her dad, discovering her mother's divorce paper showed the lawyer worked in her mother's office, making it impossible to approach him. She reached out to Grandpa George, hoping for help. "What do you need, young lady?" inquired her grandfather. "We have to help Dad. I don't know who to turn to. I can't believe what you did to your father, Jenny." "What were you thinking, helping your mother?" "Grandfather, it's all a lie. I didn't do anything. It's all my mom and her lawyer guy." "Watch your tongue, girl." "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I swear I didn't blame him for any of this. I had no idea confronting her would lead to that explosion. Fine, I'll see what I can do." "Grandfather, is he there? Can I talk to him?" "He can't have any contact until this order is lifted. Every call makes him cry, fearing your mother will find out and involve the police. His lawyer set a court date for the hearing, but nothing can be done until then." Jenny, in tears, said, "Grandpa, tell him I love him and miss him. I'll convey the message if I see him." Jenny hung up and cried for minutes. When she composed herself, she entered her mother's room, tossing her underwear and new clothes down the stairs. Carrying a heap of clothes outside, she threw them in the front yard. Some outfits still had tags. "Screw you, Mom," she said, and fetched lighter fluid from the barn. Pouring it on her clothes, she lit them with matches, realizing her mother would return soon. Jenny sat in a lawn chair, roasting marshmallows over the burning clothes. Angela, pulling into the driveway, saw Jenny and screamed, demanding an explanation. "No, Mom, I've lost my mind. I decided to make you pay for the days Dad can't talk to me. Destroying more of your things will follow unless you retract this misuse claim. If you touch me, I'll report your misuse and also let everyone know your boyfriend asked me to show my underwear. Don't worry, Mom. Things will turn into smoke until I talk to him." "Damn it!" Angela exclaimed as she entered the house. She dialed Steve, but as expected, he ignored the call and deleted the message unheard. Shortly afterward, a fire truck and police car arrived in response to a neighbor's fire report. A policeman and a firefighter approached Jenny. "What's happening here, young lady?" inquired the officer. "My mom wanted to discard clothes she'd outgrown and told me to burn them at the stake," Jenny explained. "Apparently you can't have a fire in the front yard." "Is your mother home?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "I'll use a hose to put it out if you want," a fireman offered. "Did you use anything to light it, or did you just set the clothes on fire?" "A whole can of lighter fluid," she proudly admitted. "We don't have water, but we've got some sand." "I'll fetch it," the fireman said. While he dealt with the fire, the policeman rang the doorbell. Angela, prepared to confront her daughter, realized it was the police. "We'll handle the fire, it's not a big deal, officer," Angela said before he could speak. "Ma'am, did you know it's against city ordinance to have an uncontrolled fire in your yard?" "No, I didn't," she retorted through clenched teeth. "Here's your fine, just pay it. No court appearances required. Next time, ma'am, consider donating unwanted clothes to Goodwill. Less fortunate people could use them." She closed the door. Angela's lawyer attended a restraining order hearing the following Monday, choosing not to renew it, aware it was falsely obtained. It served its purpose, buying time and tarnishing Steve's reputation. Steve's lawyer sought charges against Angela for perjury. The judge, lacking conclusive evidence of false pretenses, dismissed the perjury claim. Though the restraining order was lifted, it offered little comfort to Steve, deeply depressed by false accusations, frozen assets, spousal betrayal, and, most painfully, his daughter's betrayal. Struggling to make ends meet, he took leave from work, battled drinks, and lived in misery. In the afternoon, when Angela and Jenny were absent, Steve visited his house. Despite changed locks, the garage door opened. He found his belongings in boxes and garbage bags, noticing Angela had left the wedding album and family photographs. He maintained contact with his family, though strained due to his problems. Despite his parents urging him to see a psychiatrist, he refused, feeling he didn't need one to confirm his miserable life. Angela's law firm waged a merciless campaign, informing his employer about the restraining order and misuse allegations, resulting in Steve's termination. His contract's moral clause, meant to address such situations, might have been contested if he were in a better state of mind. But at that moment, he felt powerless to act. Steve's residence remained a mystery, with communication limited to telephone exchanges with his family. The sole glimpse of him occurred during mandatory court appearances for his divorce, where he interacted solely with his lawyer and the judge. Jenny attempted to engage him during such instances, and each time, he passed by without acknowledgement, resembling the walking dead in her eyes. Angela reveled in the unfolding events, harboring resentment toward Steve long before Martin influenced her. Throughout her manipulative endeavors, her sentiments evolved into near hatred. After prolonged legal battles, the divorce course concluded. Steve reclaimed his share of assets, successfully sold the house with his lawyer's assistance, and retained ownership of his truck. However, false rumors circulating about child misuse hindered his job search in town, despite lacking any accusations. Opting for a fresh start, Steve moved to Chicago, securing employment as a truck driver. Loading his belongings into the pickup, he bid farewell to his parents. When Jenny arrived, "Dad, I'm so sorry, none of this should have happened," she expressed, running up to hug him. He cried without reciprocating. "You chose your mother without evidence, and the dominoes fell. I had to file first to catch her off guard. Now you understand why." "Daddy, I didn't know, I'm sorry. I'm leaving now. This false accusation of child aggravation just won't go away. Once you're accused of something like that, it's a stink you just can't wash off. Someday, your mother and her lover will pay for this. Goodbye, Jennifer. I loved you more than my own life." As her grandmother hugged Jenny, he seized the opportunity to get into the truck and drive away. "Angela, will you marry me?" Martin proposed on the day the divorce finalized. "Yes, Martin, oh yes," she cried and hugged him, causing a scene in the restaurant. "Let's go to your house and celebrate," she suggested after settling the bill. Eager to move in and remodel Martin's big house, Angela planned to discard the tacky furniture and curtains chosen by his ex-wife. Their first purchase would be a new bedroom set. As they left, Martin laughed at the sight of his ex-wife, Carol, having dinner with her parents. Carol, disgusted with him and his latest mistress, spat at him as they passed by, but he paid no attention. Steve entered the truck warehouse and spotted his colleague Lou at the doorway. "Steve, what's up, dude? You look like someone spoiled your oatmeal. Divorce is finalized today. Ah, well, after what that woman did to you, you deserve to have some fun today. It's not her, it's my daughter. She took her side and I just can't handle it. She calls and emails me, but I can't bring myself to talk to her. Maybe I should see a psychiatrist. Perhaps you should let off some steam," a voice chimed in from behind them. "Hello, Marianne, that's not a bad idea," Lou added. "Ha, who needs my dried-out old self?" Steve remarked. Marianne leaned over, whispering words of affection to him, and then gracefully walked away, leaving the onlookers admiring her as she departed. Encouraged by his friends, Steve expressed his readiness to pursue Marianne, stating that she was his new partner and they should hit the road. Their initial date included dinner, a movie, and a visit to Baker Square for coffee and cake. Marianne reassured Steve, mentioning that he was a good guy going through a rough patch and that everything would work out. Reflecting on his past, Steve shared with Marianne that for a long time, he couldn't fathom what he did wrong and couldn't understand his ex-wife's aggression during the divorce. He expressed that she was terrible, but it was all over now. Holding her hand, he advised her to look forward, not behind, and promised to make it worth her while. With a smile, he squeezed her hand and suggested they go, while Marianne pulled him in for a kiss upon their exit. She then proposed if he wanted to see her bedroom. Steve regretfully replied that he wished he could. However, Marianne, undeterred, took his hand, leading him to her bedroom. Bathed in the soothing bluish tint of moonlight, they kissed and undressed slowly, intending to savor every moment. Marianne eventually lay on the bed, and Steve knelt on the floor, expressing his perspective. He remarked that her loss was his gain, and he intended to take advantage of it. He kissed her, mentioning that he was available any time. A week or so later, a man dressed in black approached the back door of a posh house in town. Expecting to break in, he smiled when he found it unlocked. Stealthily navigating through the house, he reached the room he sought. The room was well equipped, thanks to a Facebook photo of his target sitting at his desk. The arrogant man had it as his screensaver. The closet was behind and to the right of the desk, with the room dimly lit by a desk lamp. Though the closet door was closed, he could still see the room well. Opening the door behind the counter, he waited. The only concern was the target approaching the closet before sitting down. It might complicate things, but he remained confident the job would be done with a perfect alibi ensuring his safety. Martin Schindler entered his home office, glancing at the computer monitor angled on his desk. With his back turned to the cabinet, the uninvited guest cautiously opened the closet door and stealthily slipped away. Upon hearing the noise, Martin looked up and discovered a weapon pressed to his head, followed by the pulling of the trigger. Subsequently, the pistol was placed in his hand, and a note was left on the table that simply stated, "Price paid in full." The shooter swiftly exited the door after leaving the note. Upon returning home from the store, Angela entered Martin's office to share the new bedding she had purchased. She screamed at the sight of his lifeless body in the chair and immediately retrieved her cell phone to call emergency. While observing the weapon in his hand with a note on the table, she refrained from touching it. Reading the message, she received a shocking revelation. "No, Steve, no." In distress, she screamed, questioning, "What have you done?" Detective Devontae Jordan received a call and hurried to the Schindlers' home. On arrival, he saw a weeping woman in the living room, with crime scene investigators moving around the office. While scanning the scene, he noticed a new set of golf clubs in the corner and commented, "Good clubs indeed." Continuing his examination, he observed the weapon still held in the sufferer's right hand. Asking one of the first responding officers, he inquired about the current situation. Learning that it was an apparent self-inflicted gunshot to the head, the sufferer was lawyer Martin Schindler, a homeowner, with Angela Johnson as the bride, who found the body and called emergency. There was a typed note on a computer, unsigned, consisting of just one sentence. Detective Jordan handed a plastic bag with the note, frowned, and questioned Angela about its meaning. Angela clarified it wasn't self-destruction. Her ex-husband, Steve, eliminated him. Martin disliked weapons and didn't own such a firearm. Angela believed Steve did it because he felt Martin took her away. She admitted to dating the deceased while married. Detective Jordan considered potential motives, including resentment from Martin's ex-wife, who might have been angry about being left. Angela provided an alibi for her whereabouts, assuring the detective. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, Detective Jordan visited Steve Johnson, asking about his whereabouts the previous night. Steve explained he was driving a rig through Rockford, arriving at the station at 9:30 p.m. Detective Jordan informed him of Martin's apparent self-destruction, hinting at inconsistencies. Steve offered additional information, providing his new mobile number for future contact. As Detective Jordan left, he contemplated the oddities surrounding the self-destruction, such as a left-handed person shooting himself with his right hand, typing the note, and the scarcity of gunpowder marks on his hand. These anomalies troubled him as he prepared for further investigations across Chicago. After the detective departed, Steve took a seat at his kitchen table when Lou asked him what all of it meant. Steve chuckled, remarking that he couldn't believe his ex-fiancée had committed self-destruction. Lou expressed his hope that his alibi checked out. They laughed and clinked beer bottles in a toast. Angela, seated in the front row at the funeral, mourned the man who effortlessly took her from her wonderful husband. Tears flowed for the man who persuaded her to participate in a nuclear attack and execute a good man for change. She was deeply in love with her truck driver husband until she transferred to work for Martin. He targeted her immediately, wearing her down with snide comments about truck drivers and flippant remarks about him during trips. It was too easy for Martin. He planted a seed she had neglected due to Steve's long days and sometimes nights on the road, and it grew. Angela couldn't decide if she cried for her fiancé's loss or her husband's, and the breakdown with her daughter, it all seemed like a waste of time. She didn't hear or care if the room buzzed around her. She didn't notice the looks Martin's ex-wife and daughters gave her. They blamed her for his death. "You could come to the funeral and pay your respects," Angela said, approaching her daughter home for the weekend from college. Jenny looked at her intently and said, "How dare you tell me I should respect the man who destroyed my father? Forget you. I shouldn't even call that piece of garbage a man." She slammed the door as she left the house, taking the long drive back to college in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Detective Jordan sat in a meeting with his boss, discussing the lack of progress in the case. All the suspects' alibis are verified. Steve Johnson's truck tracker shows no stops on his way from Madison to Chicago, and the timing was correct. The warehouse team identified him as the driver. Angela Johnson's receipts and surveillance place her at Macy's, Victoria's Secret, and Starbucks, as the medical examiner window showed at the time of death. Schindler's ex-wife and daughters had dinner with her parents, brother, and sister-in-law in honor of her birthday, said Jordan. "Was it your ex's birthday?" the commander asked him. "No, they were just celebrating it. Heck, I even checked on Johnson's daughter, and she was at college over 3 hours away in Wisconsin." "Is there a chance it was self-destruction?" the commander asked him. "It's possible, it just seems to me that it's not true." "Well, with no suspects, no motive, and no concrete evidence that it was even a murder, let's close it as a self-destruction." Jordan nodded and left the room, upset. 6 months later, Angela invited Jason Davis to dinner. It was their third date, and Angela got him into bed. After a passionate night, Jason went home. He opened a bottle of beer before going to bed and sat down to check his email. As he sat at the kitchen table, a gun was pointed at his head and fired. They put a gun in his hand and left a note. "The price has been paid in full." Detective Jordan walked through the apartment and into the kitchen. Before he could speak, he was handed a self-destruction note. "Well, damn, it looks like I was right about something else. Now I just need to find out who the hell did this," he told the officer. "Any fingerprints, Mark?" he inquired of the technician. "Yes, but if I had to guess right now, I would say they are the victims." "Are there any witnesses? Who called the police?" Jordan asked. "A neighbor heard the shot and called emergency. No one saw anyone enter or leave." "Of course not. How did they get here? No broken locks or windows?" "It looks like a balcony to me. The sliding door was not locked. The victim probably wasn't worried about this since he was on the second floor, although it wouldn't be that difficult to climb up. I would say that anyone of fairly average height could jump, reach the bottom, and pull themselves up." "Average height for a man or a woman?" "Average man, tall woman." "Where is this guy's phone number?" Jordan asked. "Packed here." Jordan used his gloved hands to find the last call on his phone. "Just had to check. The last call was made to Angela. I'll be shocked if she's not Angela Johnson." After the usual condolences and pleasantries, the detective got to work. He inquired of Miss Johnson why her lovers seemed inclined towards self-destruction. Miss Johnson responded that she believed it was Steve who was punishing her and confirmed she had been at home all night, with her alarm system serving as verification. She explained that the alarm system detected doors and windows opening, and that she had activated it when Jason left the previous night, deactivating it only upon the detective's arrival that morning. She affirmed that the system had remained on throughout the night. When asked about her theory implicating her husband in the apparent self-destructions, she maintained her belief, stating she couldn't imagine anyone else being responsible. The detective queried about her last communication with her husband before the divorce, any signs of him following or contacting her, to which she responded negatively. She remained convinced it must be him, despite lacking evidence. After concluding his questioning, the detective asked about her height out of curiosity and offered condolences once again before leaving, requesting her to remain nearby for further inquiries. "Is it the same note?" the chief asked when Jordan returned to the police station. "Yes, sir," Detective Jordan said. "Inform me daily about your progress. This is too much for a coincidence. The woman's alibi is reliable. I'll see if I can ruin it, but we'll see. I'm going to see her ex-husband now," the detective said cautiously. "Then let me know what you get," the chief responded. As Detective Jordan left, he had a bad feeling that all of the prime suspects' alibis would be as reliable as the last time. Steve and Marianne were cozy on his couch watching Jack Ryan on Prime when the doorbell rang. "Detective Jordan, what can I do for you today?" Steve asked, gesturing for him to come in. "Sir, where were you last night at 1:30 a.m.? "On the way back from Detroit. I arrived at 2:30. What happened this time?" "Do you know Jason Davis?" "I don't think so." "He met with your ex-wife. Looks like he shot himself last night." "No freaking way." "Looks like, huh? Maybe she's a liquidator, a black widow or something like that." "Maybe, thank you. If I need anything else, I will contact you." Steve laughed as he closed the door. "What was all that, baby?" Marianne inquired. "It looks like another of my ex-wife's boyfriends has died." "Oh God," she breathed, raising her hand to her mouth. "Yeah, thank God I have an alibi. I hope whoever executes idiots keeps choosing times when I'm on the road." Steve's cell phone rang. He looked and saw it was Jenny, so he ignored it. Marianne frowned and said, "Will she never have a chance? I don't understand why you need this. She misses you." She turned to me and we talked. "What?" he shouted, standing up. She reassured him, urging him to relax, emphasizing that she wouldn't intervene in his decision and that ultimately he had to live with it. She mentioned that his ex-friend still followed him on Facebook, having seen a recent tag at a sushi place and expressing happiness for him. She informed him that his ex-friend texted her to inquire about him regularly and expressed a persistent desire to communicate with him. She recounted how his ex-friend called her weekly for casual conversations, showing interest in his activities and whereabouts. She described how his ex-friend admired her control over his schedule and appreciated the assurance that he would always be home when needed. She reminisced about their discussions regarding his travels and experiences on the road since childhood, including early morning returns and shared breakfasts filled with tales of his trips. He sighed, recalling these memories fondly. "Marianne, I love you, but please stay away from this." She hugged him and said, "I'm not involved in this. I will never drag you into anything. Everything depends on you." I told her straight out that I wouldn't put you two together. He nodded, hugged her tightly, and stopped the show. "I just don't have anything that could put her at the crime scene, Chief. In fact, there is no evidence that anyone was at the crime scene. No forced entry, no fingerprints or toe marks, and no discrepancies in spatter patterns. If it weren't for the identical notes, I would have closed them both as self-destruction," Jordan informed his boss. "About the ex's alibi?" the commander inquired. "It's tightly secured," Jordan responded, likening it to a nuclear reactor. Later, they discussed Schindler's ex-wife's whereabouts, noting she was seen on CCTV at a club with her new partner while her children were at school. 2 years afterward, Angela shifted her dating habits, deciding to avoid dating men repeatedly after incidents of self-destruction. However, she continued engaging in casual encounters but reconsidered after contracting an STD. Wanting to settle down, she began dating Lance Forrest. After a month, their relationship became public, though some considered her approach careless. Unfortunately, Lance was fatally shot while watching a ball game at home. The weapon was discovered in his hand along with the same note as before. He answered his cell phone and was greeted by Detective Stan Anson from Schaumburg. Anson asked if there were any unsolved cases that might be connected to his. Jordan confirmed there was one related to fully paid self-destructions. Anson mentioned he had such a case, which surprised Jordan. Anson asked about any connections to Angela Johnson, who was revealed to be the deceased's girlfriend. Jordan inquired about Angela's ex-husband's alibi, which Anson confirmed was solid as he was passing through Madison at the time. Anson stated Angela was alone at home, her security system providing an alibi last time. This time, Angela had ordered Chinese food delivered within 30 minutes. The shooting occurred during this time frame, according to a neighbor's emergency call. Despite the proximity of Angela's house to the deceased's apartment, they couldn't see how she could have committed the crime within that window. Jordan agreed with the assessment. They decided to meet the next day to compare files. However, despite their efforts, all alibis remained unbroken, and no new suspect emerged, leaving the cases unsolved. Steve and Marianne sat in the Great Hall, watching Jenny as she walked across the stage to receive her bachelor's degree. Steve beamed with pride and had to wipe away the tear that threatened to roll down his cheek. Marianne tightly squeezed his hand and kissed it. After the ceremony, as they headed to their car, Marianne expressed her desire for him to call someone he loved very much. He declined, explaining that the person had chosen to side with her mother rather than him, and only regretted it later when she felt guilty about her mother's actions toward him. He felt betrayed by her lack of support and emphasized the repercussions it had on his life. Marianne acknowledged his feelings. He reiterated that the person had made their choice, and they all had to accept it. Marianne frowned at his resolve, holding his hand, and questioned if he had been as stubborn before the divorce. He admitted he had not been anywhere near as stubborn. 5 years later, Angela and Jenny sat in the front row of the funeral home's memorial room. It was a large turnout for Steve Johnson's wake and funeral procession. Steve died of pancreatic cancer 4 weeks after he walked Jenny down the aisle at her wedding. He had a few new friends and colleagues who appeared, but he did not regain a large network of friends after the divorce. Most of his old friends, neighbors, and colleagues came to pay their respects to a good man they knew and had lost touch with over the years. His girlfriend, Marianne, was there. They never got married. She tried very hard not to spit on Angela for the pain she caused her man. His best friend, Lou Dierko, regaled Jenny with stories about the last years of her father's life. He filled her heart with stories she would never have known. Marianne was the one who ultimately persuaded him to heed Jenny's words and reconcile when he received a terminal diagnosis. For years, he had discarded letters, deleted emails, and ignored calls from Jenny. The reunion was impeccably timed. Knowing these were his final months, Jenny rescheduled her wedding day, incurring substantial costs due to increased fees for urgent arrangements, to fulfill her deepest wish, her father giving her away. Their tearful reunion and walk down the aisle granted Steve one last peace of mind before succumbing to his final battle. His last words expressed gratitude to Marianne for reuniting him with Jenny, and an apology for never marrying her. She understood and never pressured him into marriage. They were already content. Marianne conveyed to Jenny how he always missed her and regretted not contacting her years ago. When her mother inquired, Jenny shared moments of their reconciliation, stating, "He attended my graduation discreetly in the back rows. Marianne was with him. He followed my career, proud of my achievements as a detective in Streamwood. Clippings from the Herald adorned his walls. He cherished your accomplishments, calling you a crime scene expert." Marianne confirmed. "He said it was because of all that stuff when you were little. You all watched Columbo and criminologist shows together. He hoped you would make it to Chicago or some other big city and have more important things to do." Jenny smiled through most of the wake, listening to stories about her father's life post-divorce. She was pleased to finally meet Marianne, with whom she still spoke from time to time. His new life seemed as good as it could be, and he died a contented man. After the funeral, she said her last prayer, thanking God that he had finally found peace. Angela attempted to reconnect with Jenny during the wake and funeral, but ruined everything at the after-service lunch with an ill-timed comment. Alone after everyone left, Angela remarked, "Jenny, I finally found peace." Shocked, Jenny responded, "What are you talking about, Mom? I've avoided relationships for years, fearing Dad would damage them. He was acquitted by the police." Enraged, Jenny declared, "You worthless cow. Now you're happy he's gone so you can have fun? I had hoped you'd changed, but now I hope you rot in hell." Angela winced, attempting to explain, but Jenny cut her off, saying, "The next time I see you, Mom, is when we get your fat back in the ground." Despite Angela's pleas, Jenny concluded, "Goodbye, Mom. Good luck in your new bed life." This marked the final exchange between mother and daughter. 10 months later, Angela and her boyfriend, Charlie Harlan, had dinner at an upscale steakhouse. Charlie expressed his appreciation for the wonderful 8 months they had spent together. Angela squeezed his hand and reciprocated his sentiments, expressing her initial uncertainty about finding love again, but feeling fortunate to have found each other. Charlie then confessed his love for Angela and proposed marriage. Angela took a deep, deep breath and accepted his proposal. At that moment, she thought to herself that Steve was dead, and she had nothing to worry about. A week later, Charlie sat on his back porch contemplating his impending wedding and Angela moving in with him. He drew deeply from his Cuban Monte Cristo No. 2 cigar and exhaled the smoke as he sighed contentedly. A weapon was pressed to his temple, and the trigger was pulled. A pistol was put in his hand, a cigar was set in an ashtray, and a note was left under a heavy ashtray on the table. "The price has been paid in full." Angela ended the call with Detective Jordan, her face wet with tears after the emotional conversation. She went to the bathroom, grabbed a bottle of sleeping pills. Though she didn't need them for a while, she always kept them handy. Walked to her mailbox, placed an envelope in it, and raised the flag for outgoing mail. Lying on the bed, she reflected on her wedding to Steve. The beautiful day it had been, her pride in Jenny's career, family vacations, and park trips. She regretted ever meeting Martin Schindler and ruining her own life. Finally, she prayed to see Steve soon. Placing the note on her chest, she fell asleep for the last time. Her note read, "My price has been paid in full." Jenny arrived home with mail and a bag of groceries. She restored everything to its place, hung her keys on the hook, and kicked off her shoes. Blake, her husband, wouldn't be home until nearly midnight due to his second shift as a cop. To savor the quiet of the house, she uncorked a bottle of California Cabernet and poured a full glass. After a sip, she approached the stack of mail and noticed a letter. Shocked, she screamed upon reading the sender's name, Angela Johnson. Tearing it open, she read her mother's final message, realizing the true meaning behind her mother's self-destruction. "Wow, Mom. Wow," she uttered to the empty house. She dialed Jordan on her mobile phone. "Detective Jordan, it's Jenny Stanger, daughter of Steve and Angela Johnson. Hello, young lady. Sorry to hear about your mother's self-destruction." "Thank you. At least you don't have to investigate." "Yes, what can I do for you, Jenny?" "I got a letter from my mother, a confession." "What?" he shouted into the phone. "A confession of all the self-destructions that were actually slaughters. Clearly she was crazy." "I can't believe this." "Jesus Christ. Okay, come and meet me at my site as soon as you can." Jenny burned the first page in the fireplace, ensuring it was completely incinerated. The letter conveyed, "My dear Jenny, I offer you this last gift of my repentance. Whether you believe it or not, I love you with all my heart and apologize for all the pain I caused you. It wasn't intentional. Damaging you and your father was the worst thing I've ever done. I knew it had to be you when Charlie was eliminated. I accept my punishment and apologize for making you punish me. I hope you can now live without the pain of my betrayal. Destroy this page and give page 2 to the police. Page 2 is my full confession. I take responsibility for everything. It's all my fault. I can never bring back your lost years, but I pray for your forgiveness and peace. Please share stories of good times with my future grandchildren, not tales of how I ruined our lives. I pray for your long and happy marriage with Blake. Don't be tempted away when someone tries to lure you. I love you wholeheartedly. Mother P.S. Kindly seek assistance from someone and obtain the help you urgently require." The weary note carried the weight of immense guilt. "Jenny, upon receiving this, I will have already taken my own life. I can no longer bear the burden of guilt. I ended the lives of these men, my lovers. They paid a price for taking me from your father. I always belonged to him. Perhaps now I can reunite with him. May the Lord forgive me. My love for you is eternal. I apologize for ruining our life before Martin. We once had an ideal family. Mother Jenny approached Detective Jordan's desk and exchanged greetings before settling into the chair he offered. As Detective Jordan read the letter, he expressed his regret to Jenny for suspecting her. Jenny agreed, expressing disbelief at her mother's actions and speculating that her mother might have lost her sanity years ago. She couldn't comprehend her mother's motive for dating men just to kill them, and found it difficult to understand. Jenny noted that it somewhat made sense that her mother was responsible for some murders, considering her whereabouts couldn't be confirmed at the crime scenes and the lack of substantial evidence. She mentioned that she had always thought it could have been her father or Schindler's ex-wife. But their alibis couldn't be disproved either. Jenny expressed real belief that it was all over, the murders, her mother's pain, and her own suffering, and bid farewell to Detective Jordan. Exiting the police station, Jenny wore a wide smile and shook her head. She paused, opened the car door, gazed at the sky, and expressed, "Thank you, Mom."
Story 2.
Facebook notification revealed my wife's 5-year affair and led me to confront the cheating truth. I've been married for 11 years with 2 kids, 8 and 5. My married life has been great until now, something I treasure a lot. My wife had been an amazing partner and a great mom to my kids. However, something happened 2 days ago that made me question my perfect, happy family. This Friday night, we were lying on our bed to sleep. My wife was showing some funny videos on her phone, and that's when the Facebook message popped, tingled with the chat head. It was there for a good 5 seconds. I saw the name and profile picture on the chat head before she swiped it away. It was 1 a.m. in the night. I asked her whose text it was. She replied, "I don't know, maybe some random on Facebook." I gave her back the phone and asked if she wanted to respond. She said no, it must not be urgent, and we continued to watch the video. A few minutes later, another message popped up from the same chat, and she swiped it off again. This happened a few more times, and every time it occurred, our awkwardness grew, followed by moments of silence. I could feel the cold, eerie vibe between us. I could sense an urgency that she wanted the phone back but couldn't or wouldn't ask because that would lead to another series of questions from me. We were no longer enjoying the funny video, we were just pretending to watch it. My mind was clogged with the thought of who was messaging her so late, why she had gotten awkward about it, and why she was lying that she didn't know, when we both had clearly seen the name on the pop-up head. I'm sure she also must have been restless, waiting to have her phone back. When it happened for the 5th or 6th time, I handed over the phone back to her and said, "You should see if someone needs any help." She tried to assure me that it was fine, but I suppressed my doubts and said, "Maybe someone is in an emergency and needs something, so you should see to it." I gave her the phone and rolled to the other side of the bed. I could see the reflection of her screen light on the ceiling. A few minutes later, she put down the phone and hugged me from the back. She tried to cuddle and initiate intimacy, but I didn't reciprocate. I felt like candy given to an upset kid. She realized that I had gotten suspicious of those creepy late-night messages, and she tried to cover it up through lovemaking. The next morning, I was still feeling low about the entire situation. She asked me what's wrong. I told her nothing, but when she insisted, I asked her who had messaged her that late in the night. She said she had not seen it yet. It was a plain, bald lie to my face. I'm damn sure that she had seen those messages right after I gave her the phone back. In fact, I'm pretty sure that she had responded to those texts as well, from the moment she got the phone back. I'm just flustered with the way she's lying to my face. I said, "Then check it now." She raised her eyebrows, suggesting that I was being nosy in her business. I'm not nosy, I'm bothered because she was lying. She then picked up the phone and pretended to open the messenger and read it. Then she said, "Oh, it's my coworker from my previous workplace I used to work at 5 years ago." I asked her what the message was about. She said, "Nothing, just general stuff." I asked, "What general stuff?" She replied, "Oh, nothing important." I instinctively replied, "Show me." She froze. She was like, "What? Why do you want to see my phone? Do you suspect anything here?" I said, "I'm not suspicious, but probably curious because of the way you've been acting about this text." I'd never been so suspicious about her actions, but God knows why this time, I just didn't feel right about it. She has been gaslighting the situation since then. I don't know what's wrong with asking her to show the phone. I said I would only see the chat and nothing else, yet she's not willing to show me. She says I'm invading her privacy. I don't know, guys, if asking to see your wife's phone is a privacy invasion, or if I'm an a-hole here. Would appreciate any fresh perspective. Edit to add, I read the first 4 to 5 comments and wanted to clarify a few things. I'm asked if we have access to each other's phones. The answer to this is she has my password, and she sometimes accesses it to make international calls. I don't know her password. Even when I needed to use her phone, she would unlock it and give it to me. I never asked for her password. Never felt the need to know it. This time also, I'm not asking for her password. All I'm saying is, show me the chat. That's it. Second, this is the first time I've ever asked her to show me the phone. I've never done this before. As I said, I never got suspicious of her before. If I missed adding any crucial information, I would be adding them in the comments and replies. It's understandable that you're feeling a bit suspicious, OP. I mean, late-night messages from a coworker from 5 years ago? That's enough to raise an eyebrow or two, and the whole dodging the question routine is definitely not adding any points to the trust meter. Update. One last update. This past week has been difficult, with so many fights and yelling at home. My house used to be a peaceful place. The only yelling was from my children's fights. But now, it has become a battleground between me and my wife. We fought for the whole of last week, and we both were pretty much stuck to our guns. She was assuring me that there was nothing wrong in the chats. They just used to occasionally check up on each other, send birthday wishes and festive greetings, and nothing more than that. I said, if that's so, then why are you not showing me that? I want to see that for myself. She said it was not about showing the message, it was about trust issues, and that I didn't trust her and that I was intruding on her privacy. She thought I would move on from this soon and forget about it. She tried all means to distract me from this topic. The very next day, she planned for a gaming evening. That didn't go too well because I was feeling low for most of the time. I tried to be cheerful with the kids, but I also made it clear to my wife that this was not going to help. Then, 2 days later, she announced at the dinner table that we were going for a 3-day camping trip to freshen up. I understood her tricks and said I was busy, would not be able to make it at such short notice. The kids have their exams this month. They were also kind of confused as to why she was planning a trip just before their tests. When none of her tricks worked, she finally agreed to show the chats. But she laid some ground rules, that I wouldn't check anything else and ask no questions. I said I wouldn't check anything else but couldn't promise that I wouldn't ask anything. She said, well, in that case, let me give you a heads up. There might be an occasional spell of flirtatious talk, so don't freak out. Now it got wild. She assured me that it was harmless and didn't mean anything at all, it was just some generous compliments on her pictures. I said, sure, I don't mind any innocent flirt. I'm not going to break my head and definitely not my marriage for something so trivial. I read the chats, and it was an on and off conversation. But I felt it was inconsistent, and there was no chat prior to last year's Thanksgiving. I asked, what happened to the previous chats because you had known him for 6 or 7 years? He was your colleague from work. She said she deleted it. She claims she deletes her chats every few months. I asked, what's the logic behind that? She said nothing, just like this. I wanted to check other chats to see if she deleted them too, but she reminded me that I promised I wouldn't check anything else, so I had to adhere to the rules. The situation has become worse than before. It has led to more doubts and apprehension than clarity. I was looking up here for any hack to retrieve the deleted messages but couldn't find any. Not sure if there's any way out. Do you guys know of any such hack to retrieve deleted Facebook messages? Would appreciate the help. Seems like you stumbled upon the digital equivalent of Pandora's box, a treasure trove of deleted messages and flirtatious banter, all neatly tucked away in the virtual realm. Who knew a simple gaming night and a surprise camping trip could morph into a full-blown interrogation? Something tells me the juicy stuff was deleted, and the camping trip sounds like a means of distraction. Update 2. Some follow-up to what happened next. As you told, there were no ways to retrieve the deleted messages from Messenger. It doesn't go to the archive, so no luck on that front. My wife insisted that I move on from that incident, but I had this nagging feeling that something was not right. She suggested we go on vacation. I said, instead, let's go for couples therapy. She was repulsive, saying we didn't need any. I said I needed one because what I'm going through is not normal. My trust has run thin, and we cannot have a healthy relationship without trust. She agreed to visit the couples counselor. Visit 1, she's too guarded about her feelings. She measures her words before answering anything. She's more like, I don't see any problem in our marriage. It's just you, but I'm here to support you. The therapist made it clear that it's about both of us. Even if it's me who wanted counseling, the reason is her, so she has to be involved and cooperative. My wife said she needs time to open up. We came back from the session, and I find her minded. Any confrontation with her leads to a fight these days. She gaslights it and makes a point that I'm ruining our beautiful marriage with my baseless suspicions. Yesterday, she went grocery shopping, and her car got flat tires. She asked me to pick her up. While driving back, she was cuddling my arms. I asked her if she wanted to stop by for a coffee. She nodded yes. She was silent for most of the drive to the coffee house. She was anticipating a confrontation. I also thought this was the best time to talk about it. I asked her if she wanted to confess anything. This is the time. She said they flirted with each other. Flirting was fine with me until it was within the limits. She remained silent and said on a few occasions, the limits might have gotten crossed. Limits crossed, as in sexting? She said yes. I asked how many times. She said she didn't have the count, on and off, in the last 5-6 years. My heart was pounding as she was unfolding a new angle to my every question. I started asking her the next question. All my deadliest nightmares were coming true. I didn't know if I was ready for the answer that might come to my next question. With severe hesitation, I asked her, is that all? Was any physical relationship involved? She took a few seconds to reply, and that pause felt like forever to me. She started sobbing and replied, yes, once. At that moment, I lost my crap. Like, what the hell? She's been sleeping with her coworker behind my back, and I have no idea about it. I freaked out. I stood up and left the coffee house. She followed me outside. I was racing up and down near my car. She said it was a long time ago, and she had almost forgotten what had happened. Same classic line of every cheater, that it means nothing. I love you, and my family is everything for me. I said, no, family is not everything for you. If it was, you wouldn't have screwed it up. I got into the car, and before I could drive off, she hopped in. I dropped her home. She insisted we have this discussion in our bedroom, but I was done talking to her. I went to the bar and sat there until midnight, wondering where I went wrong to deserve this betrayal. I haven't been home for 2 days. She's been calling me nonstop to have a conversation, but I have hung up on her. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I'm absolutely clueless. I couldn't fathom this to be physical cheating to the extreme. I imagined it to be emotional cheating, but now what do I do? Dang, this is hard. Flirting, sexting, physical cheating, it's like she's collecting cheating bingo points or something. Update: 3 more updates on my situation. 3 days after that confession, I got a call from the therapist. She asked me if I was going to join my wife for the session. I said no, I'm done with it, and I'm in no mood to repair this relationship. She said my wife was there and was waiting for me so that she could come clean of her guilt. I said, let her go to hell with her guilt, and hung up. That same day, I went home. My wife asked me why I didn't go to the counseling session. Don't I want to work on our marriage? I said no and moved my essentials to the guest bedroom. She insisted that we seek therapy and work on this. We have 2 small kids, and for their sake, we should put in an effort. I shooed her away and didn't talk to her for more than a week. Meanwhile, I sensed that my home was getting colder. My children were silent, which was very unusual for their behavior and age. They quickly noticed that I was sleeping in the guest bedroom and not talking to Mom. They questioned me about it, and I gave some BS reason. But the problem was, me. I was stalling it. I was delaying making a decision. I realized we cannot live like this. It's either I have to heal and forgive her, or I should separate and move out. Hanging in between was the worst for the kids. I decided to go for couples therapy before making my next move. Visit 2. It was intense for both of us. I tell you, whatever happened until now was not all of it. I got to know the complete truth, and thankfully I attended the session. It helped me make a decision. My wife confessed that she slept with her affair partner some 5 years back. She was going through emotional turmoil. She had lost her mother back then while battling postpartum trauma after the birth of our second child. The second pregnancy and delivery were difficult for her, and losing her mother just after that made the situation worse for her. Though I remember having her back and doing everything in my means to support her at the time, she claimed she needed a place to channel her turmoil. She could think of nothing better than cheating. It happened this way. He congratulated her on her second child, then she told him about her mother's demise, and he lent his emotional support. She opened up to him about her postpartum turmoil, and they got engaged in sexting. Then I went on a week-long trip, and they slept together. That was the first time. Guilt kicked in for both of them, and they ghosted each other. They went no contact for more than a year. He messaged her on Thanksgiving, and things got heated up again. They slept together again, and then stopped talking after that. This happened 6 times in 5 years when they flirted, sexted, slept together, and ghosted. So this Facebook notification was the start of the next cycle. And they would have ended up in bed soon if I didn't see the notification that night. She cried and said nothing, unlike last time. My emotions took over my anger, and I cried like a helpless child, felt like a gush of emotions flowing out in the form of tears. She pleaded with me to forgive her and said she would never talk to her affair partner again and would never cheat on me again. I didn't say anything, but I have made another appointment with the therapist, and this time I'll be visiting alone. Now that I know it is not a one-time thing, I'm pretty much clear on what I want to do. We are still in our late 30s and have a couple more decades to go. I don't want to be with a person I cannot trust blindly. So yeah, I'm going to file for separation soon. Soon? Why not today? What are you waiting for, OP? Meanwhile, your kids are probably wondering if they accidentally wandered onto the set of Days of Our Dysfunctional Lives instead of their usual after-school special. Update 4. We're in the middle of separation. It's a tough time for the family, especially the kids, but we have to do this, even for the sake of our children. We've been living separately since that day. My wife has offered me all sorts of options as trade-offs for divorce, the extreme of which is, I can sleep with whoever I want and she wouldn't question me for that. I can have a mistress or an affair for a year until I assure her I'll come back to her and won't divorce her. It felt gross. That's not my idea of being married. I said, I prioritize loyalty over everything else. I was loyal in my marriage, and if I have to do what you're offering, why do I have to marry you? I said separation is inevitable, but if she really wants to repent or do something for me, she should let me go without being greedy. We would be co-parenting our children. I have offered her to live in our house with the kids, so there's minimal change in the children's lives. I have found a place for myself, a tiny one for my single self, but it would take a month to get possession. Until then, the guest bedroom is my den. We've spoken to the children about the separation, enrolled them in therapy. We are seeking counseling as a family and as individuals to be able to cope with the changing dynamics. It feels terrible to be separated from my children, but I think that's the best for all of us. They've seen us fighting and yelling at each other, and that's not a pleasant sight either. Seeing their parents living separately is heartbreaking for them, but soon they'll understand that it's for everyone's good when they see us as happy individuals. I'll update the thread as the situation progresses. Update 5. It was not as easy as I thought. The day I was moving out was quite a disaster for me and my family, including my soon-to-be ex-wife. I was anticipating this to be hard, but since I was living with them, I didn't realize it would be this hard. There was too much crying, and emotions burst out. My soon-to-be ex-wife tried until the last moment to talk me out of the separation, but it was off the radar. I packed up and took my children to my new place. This was to make them understand that they have 2 houses and Dad is still here for them, even though living apart. When I was leaving, she hugged me and cried. I'm still mad at her, but I let her cry on my shoulder. She said she also wanted to come to my new house. I said she's not welcome there. She broke down so badly that she didn't care that the children were around and said, I bargained my happy and stable marriage for something so cheap and meaningless. What I did has no importance in my life, and yet I lost everything for that. I said, I understand the pain and helplessness you're going through, but you're the one responsible for this? No one, not even the affair partner, has any accomplice in your misery. After knowing about their affair pattern, it doesn't look like they had any sort of emotional connection. It sounds like occasional cold sex, and they move on with their individual lives. Sadly for my wife, I was able to get to the truth. That she has to go through this while her affair partner is leading his life peacefully with his wife and children. I'm not sure if my soon-to-be ex has updated the affair partner about her divorce. They might completely cut off from each other after this if the affair partner treasures his marriage and doesn't want to end up having a fate like my soon-to-be ex. Or they may go deeper into the affair. I don't want to break my head over this. Some of you commented that I should inform the affair partner's wife about the secret affair. Like me, she also must be in the dark about this. Yeah, that makes sense, but I'm yet to dig into that thought. I have very limited coordinates about the affair partner, and trying to find the channel to contact his wife would be a task. So maybe once I'm settled into this new place, I'll try to reach out to her. I'll try updating this thread whenever possible, but even if I don't or delay it, I want you all to know that I appreciate all the support I got here. Thanks. Wow, what a roller coaster ride you've been on, OP. The Divorce Olympics, where the hurdles are high and the finish line keeps moving. Separation is never easy, especially with kids involved, but it sounds like you're handling it with resilience. Your approach to the situation, despite its challenges, is refreshing. It's commendable that you're prioritizing your children's well-being while navigating through this difficult time. Co-parenting can be tough, but it seems like you're committed to making the transition as smooth as possible for them. What do you make of this? Do you have a similar story? Share it with us in the comments below, and thank you for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time!
Story 3.
Standing at the window, I observed the car pulling into the driveway, turning right, and disappearing into the street. I questioned why I wasn't more upset, having just witnessed 10 years of my life slip away. Wasn't there supposed to be more than a shrug and a casual acknowledgement that I should go take care of the dripping faucet? Turning towards the kitchen, I mentally replayed the events of the last half hour. Returning from work, I found my wife, Peggy, seated at the kitchen table with a full glass of wine. I sensed something was amiss right away. Firstly, she was home before me, a departure from her usual schedule of arriving half an hour to an hour after me. Secondly, there was nothing on the stove. Finally, a glass of wine, a rare choice for Peg. No sooner had I entered the room than she asked me to sit down, revealing she had something to say. Grabbing a beer from the refrigerator, I settled across from her. Peg told me she had noticed a disconnection between us in the last 6 months. Uncertain about the cause, she expressed her concern about our drifting apart. Despite attempting to discuss it, all she heard was that we were going through a rough time, and things would improve. Peg then informed me of her decision to initiate a break, emphasizing it wasn't about divorce, just a temporary separation. She felt the need for space to reflect on her life and understand the reasons behind our relationship strain, encouraging me to do the same. In response, I tried to downplay the severity of the situation, urging Peg not to view it as that bad. Acknowledging our problems, I emphasized that every marriage faced challenges. I expressed my belief that we couldn't solve these issues by being apart and not communicating. Peg informed me that talking wouldn't resolve our issues, emphasizing that I only perceived one problem in our marriage, the lack of closeness. According to her, my proposed solution was too simplistic, merely involving her getting undressed and allowing me to do as I pleased. Peg asserted that there was more to our problems. We no longer made love or snuggled, and she couldn't explain why. Despite still loving me as much as the day we got married, something was wrong, and she needed space to figure it out. She clarified that she didn't want to throw 10 years of marriage away, but believed that time apart might help. Peg had already packed her belongings and planned to stay with her sister until finding her own place, promising to call me weekly to stay in touch. As she prepared to leave, mentioning her commitment to marry, she departed without a goodbye kiss. Her actions spoke volumes, revealing the depth of our situation. It didn't take long for word to spread that Peggy and I had broken up. Most of our friends sympathized and tried their best to cheer me up. Peggy would call me once a week and ask how I was feeling, and I'd say I was doing fine. And then I'd ask how she was feeling, and she'd say she was fine. Then I'd ask her if she was ready to come home, and she'd say, "Not yet." 6 weeks into Peg's absence, unsettling rumors surfaced, hinting at her having a boyfriend. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe that it was just like she said, that she just needed some time alone to get her thoughts in order, and then she'd come home. I kept hearing different things, so I decided to check out the rumors. I would find out where Peg was staying, do a little investigation, and put an end to the rumors. But no one could tell me where she was staying. Either couldn't or wouldn't. And I began to sense that something in the situation was extremely suspicious. I dined with my friend Tom, and his wife Tanya shared my concerns, inadvertently revealing that I planned to hire a private investigator to locate Peg and verify the rumors. I observed Tom exchanging a glance with Tanya, and she subtly nodded. Tom advised me to save my money, confirming the accuracy of the rumors, but refusing to disclose further details. In response to my inquiry about Peggy leaving me for someone named Adam White, Tom explained that Adam worked with Peggy, and she had indeed left me for him. I expressed confusion, questioning why she didn't simply get a divorce instead of opting for separation. Tom countered by highlighting Peg's meticulous planning, suggesting that she had been dating Adam for almost a year and likely had contingency plans in place. According to him, Peg might have organized the separation so she could return home if things didn't work out with Adam. Feeling frustrated with the lack of information from my supposed friends, I stood up, tossed my napkin on the table, and declared that I would walk myself before leaving. On the way home, I pondered what I had just discovered. No closeness with Peg for over a year because she refused to be with me. No closeness for over a year because she rejected my touch. And all the while, she pretended everything was fine. I stayed at home, played the good boy, and waited for the unfaithful truth. All my friends knew, yet they let me sit there and wait. The waiting was over. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with the cordless detective agency and provided them with an advance. I informed them of Peg and her boyfriend's workplace, instructing them to gather all possible information. Then I went home and created a list of tasks to end my relationship with Peg. I mentioned that I would wait for the detective report, intending to have the list and be prepared once it was available. After completing the list, I leaned back in my chair and contemplated another issue. I acknowledged that it had been almost 16 months without any closeness due to Peg's rejection, and decided that now that I knew the reason, I wouldn't remain celibate any longer. Sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a beer and planning to end the long dry spell, I recalled Tom's words about Peg's meticulous planning. Knowing her well, I realized she had plans for my reaction and how to use it against me in the divorce. The list I made was useless. She could predict my response. A new list took shape, requiring immediate action and strategies to turn the tables on Peg. The next morning, I went to the bank to deposit my check. While there, I checked the safe Peg and I shared. The register showed Peg regularly checking it weekly. I noticed she was watching me, ready to respond at the first sign that I was on to her. I pondered that for a moment. Afterward, I removed the 5 certificates of deposit from the plastic envelopes, went upstairs, and used the bank's copy machine to duplicate all 5. Subsequently, I placed the copies back in the envelopes within the box. Unless Peg took the discs out of the envelopes to check them, she would never know about the switch. Knowing that Peg was keeping tabs on me, I casually took my passport out of the box and mentioned carelessly to the woman at the bank, as she returned the box, that I was going to Mexico for a fishing trip. I walked out of the bank with 5 CDs in my pocket. My visits to the bank averaged 2 times a week. During each visit, I cashed in 1 CD, paid an early withdrawal fee, and then stashed the cash when I got home. Lacking faith in credit cards due to their potential pitfalls, I held an American Express card in my name, where the full balance is settled with the bill, along with several gasoline company credit cards and 1 Visa card with a low limit. In contrast, Peg possessed a good half-dozen credit cards in her name, some with high limits. Monthly, I paid the bills, compiled a list of the balances, and set it aside. I compiled a list of desired items, then went online. Over the next 2 weeks, I initiated spending on Peg's credit cards. My intention was to leave her with substantial credit card debt upon my departure. I upgraded my computer, acquired a new Dell with all the accessories, purchased a Remington 700 on eBay, and obtained other items like a digital camera and a modern phone with various features. The house belonged to Peg, inherited from her parents, so I had no legal claim to it. Nevertheless, we used it as collateral for an open line of credit. Timing it right, I could draw from the line before she realized. Previously questioning why, during our trial separation, she left me in her house instead of asking me to leave, I now understood that being in the house implied I was eagerly awaiting her return. I viewed the separation as temporary from her perspective. Subsequently, I closed my 401(k) at work, paid the penalty, and saved the money. I leaned back in my chair and awaited the private investigator's report. The only challenge was how to discreetly conclude it without attracting attention. To avoid surveillance, I decided to plan weekend fishing trips. She was aware of my fondness for fishing and the catches I brought home, making it unlikely for her to hire a private investigator to follow me. After all, wasn't I a fool? Hadn't she been playing with my mind for over a year? On a Friday, just before leaving work, I received a call from Tanya, urging me to stop by their place. Despite attempting to decline, she insisted it was crucial, so I agreed to visit. Upon arrival, Tanya welcomed me and led me into the living room, where Tom was seated in a soft armchair. He stood up, extended his hand for a shake, and motioned for me to relax while he fetched a beer. Tom informed me that Tanya needed to talk to me, assuring me that he agreed completely with what she was going to say. After he left for the kitchen, Tanya indicated that I would need some beer. When Tom returned, he handed me a Bud Light, mentioned that he had things to do and wouldn't be back until midnight, and then left through the front door. With the door closing as the signal, Tanya began to speak. She acknowledged that I overheard their conversation the night I ran away from them, expressing regret for any hurt caused. Tanya explained that they genuinely liked me and didn't intend to hurt me. Complicating matters, she revealed that she and Peg were also friends. Tanya admitted they hoped Peg would return home to me, acknowledging my love for her. They had kept quiet, believing that if we were together again, forgiveness and forgetting wouldn't be an issue. Tanya considered this their apology and revealed it was only part of the reason they wanted me to stop by. Knowing my character, Tanya stated that they believed I wouldn't cheat on my wife, comparing it to my aversion to robbing a bank. Then she caught me off guard with a question about the duration since I last had closeness. I observed her attire for the first time, a deep-cut blouse showing ample cleavage, a short skirt, and high heels revealing attractive legs. Despite our friendship, I couldn't help but be physically affected. Remembering Tom's earlier comment, I began to suspect where the conversation was heading. In a subdued tone, I disclosed that it had been a year and a half. Tanya leaned toward me, and as she hoarsely expressed her desire to change that, I couldn't help but notice her provocative attire. I explained to Tanya that I couldn't proceed with the suggested arrangement, considering Tom's friendship. As I attempted to stand up, she firmly grabbed my arm and pulled me back down. Tanya reassured me that Tom was aware of the situation and had left to provide us with privacy. She clarified that it wasn't a pity or mercy gesture, but rather a decision they had been discussing for months. Tanya explained that Tom was infertile and they wanted a baby, expressing the hope that I could help them while they assisted me. Stunned, I sat there in a daze, trying to comprehend her proposal. When I finally found my voice, I expressed confusion, questioning why they had chosen me. Tanya emphasized their desire for a known donor who would be involved in the child's life, suggesting that I would play the role of the godfather, always there for the baby like an uncle. I struggled to grasp the logic of her proposition, but Tanya insisted that they had thought it through. She presented scenarios where I might be needed, either for emotional support or even as a potential organ donor in critical situations. Tanya asserted that they wanted me to be part of their family. Despite my reservations, she shifted the conversation, questioning whether I found her attractive. Tanya squeezed the lump in my pants, interpreting it as a positive reaction. She then knelt down, unzipped my pants, and explained the advantages of being the father of her child, highlighting the need for frequent lovemaking to ensure pregnancy. Tanya assured me that she wouldn't limit our encounters to her most fertile days, and suggested that we proceed to the bedroom for what she referred to as serious procreation. After kissing Tanya once more, I prepared to leave. As she escorted me to the door, she expressed gratitude for what had just transpired. Tanya mentioned her desire to continue such encounters daily until she became pregnant. However, she acknowledged that Tom was accustomed to more frequent closeness, about 3 or 4 times a week. Despite Tom being fine with us seeing each other, she didn't want to offend him. Tanya requested that I call her the next day to make plans for the future. All the way home, I thought about what had just happened, and as I pulled into the driveway, it occurred to me that if Peg was watching me, she would find out about my visits to Tom and Tanya, and noticed that Tom had left and I had stayed a few more hours. The next morning, I called Tanya and explained my thoughts to her, but she told me not to worry because Tom had not left. He had gone down to his basement workshop and stayed there until I left. This information got me thinking. It was one thing to make love to Tanya when Tom was gone, but could I do it if I knew he was in the house? Tanya must have known what I was thinking because she said, "Don't worry, Rob. Everything will be fine, I promise." That same day, I got a call from Tom, inviting me to have a drink with him after work. It was a bit awkward. Try sitting down with a guy you've known for 20 years, who's a good friend, and whose wife you just had a consensual night with. He must have known what I was thinking, so he got right to the point. Tom acknowledged the awkwardness of the situation and expressed the need to discuss it. He affirmed his complete agreement with what had transpired between Tanya and me. Tom disclosed that Tanya hadn't revealed the full truth and admitted that he was impotent, unable to engage in intimate activity for over a year. He explained that Tanya's passionate behavior the previous night was an attempt to compensate for his inability, and her concern for not wanting to hurt him was a cover for the truth. Tom contrasted Tanya's consideration for his feelings with Peg's selfishness, noting how Tanya put him first, even in challenging circumstances. Tom shared that Tanya's sensuality was a challenge for him, and despite her efforts to cope, she was inevitably going to seek satisfaction elsewhere. He understood her love for him, but recognized the impossibility of maintaining their relationship if she were to cheat behind his back. Tom revealed the dilemma he faced. While he could comprehend the reasons for potential infidelity, he couldn't tolerate the dishonesty that would come with it. Tom said that only solution, as far as him could see, was to handle it openly. However, Tanya wasn't the type to agree to take a lover openly while him sat in the living room. She could probably do it with a stranger in a motel room, but not with him around. They needed someone steady, someone we both loved and felt comfortable with. After considering various candidates and not reaching an agreement, they kept coming back to me. There was concern that if they started with me and Peg came back, it would stop, and they would have to start over. Tom expressed confidence that Peg would eventually return, given that everyone who knew Adam White considered him an unpleasant person. He believed Peg would realize that soon enough and come back to me, convinced that I was oblivious to her actions. I chuckled because Tom seemed to understand me well. The prolonged separation made me sense that something was wrong, and now I knew it. According to Tom, Peg was history, even if she didn't know it yet. He was confident that I wouldn't take her back under any circumstances, freeing Tanya and him to approach me. They wanted to have a baby, and Tanya needed a physical relationship. Until doctors could identify and resolve Tom's issue, they needed someone else to fulfill that role for Tanya. Tom acknowledged that it might sound peculiar, but he believed that me being intimate with his wife would, in fact, save his marriage. He wanted me to get used to the idea that he knew about it, and there was nothing wrong with him. I was left speechless, finding the situation so unusual that it was difficult to comprehend. Tom, after staring into his glass, turned his gaze to me and expressed his emotional struggle, sharing that the inability to satisfy his wife was deeply painful for him. He emphasized the devastating impact it would have on him if he were to lose her, and earnestly asked for my assistance, acknowledging the difficulty of the situation. After a brief pause, I nodded in agreement. On Sunday, I invited Tom, Tanya, and 3 other couples over for a barbecue. And when the other couples left, Tom went into the study and played on my computer while Tanya and I went upstairs to my bedroom. By the time I had undressed, Tanya was lying on the bed with her legs spread wide and begging me to hurry up. After spending an hour together, Tanya glanced at me and commented that Peg had managed to escape consequences for her actions, expressing her disbelief and suggesting that Peg must be either crazy or stupid. I could sense that Tom understood Tanya's sensuality. Before parting ways, Tanya reluctantly distanced herself from me a 3rd time. I then accompanied both Tanya and Tom to the car, where Tom shook my hand and Tanya kissed me on the cheek. We all concurred that the day had been a success and discussed the possibility of repeating the experience soon. To an outsider, our conversation would have appeared to be about a barbecue. Monday afternoon, I met with John Abbott of the Cordless Agency, and handing me the report, he said, "Every time I do one of these things, I hope it's just a misunderstanding and that nothing is going on. But there's no doubt about it. Here, your fee also covers our appearance in court on your behalf, if what you decide to do goes to trial." I shook his hand, walked out of his office, and on the way home, I wasn't at all as pissed off as I thought I would be. Probably because I had already accepted that it was true, and by the time I got the report, I had it all sorted out in my mind. What am I going to do about this situation? Nothing that I hadn't already done. The only thing I had to do was to get the line of credit in place in time, so that Peg wouldn't find out about it until it was too late. I'll meet with a lawyer and get the paperwork done, but I won't file it until I'm ready. For the next 5 weeks, we met with Tom and Tanya 3 or 4 times a week, either at their place or mine. They started a rumor that I was going through a rough patch and that they were spending time with me, trying to cheer me up. Peg called me every week, but I stopped asking how she was feeling and when she was coming home. Finally, I'd had enough. I wrote checks on the line of credit, and as soon as they ran out, I found an apartment, moved out of the house, and served Peg with divorce papers. Instead of infidelity, they cited irreconcilable differences. I did this so that Peg wouldn't know I knew about White. She'll see it as my way of encouraging her to decide to come home. She'll call me, write some nonsense about me overreacting, and then probably suggest we meet somewhere for drinks and dinner, where she'll try to calm me down and talk some sense into me. I'll agree to meet her, listen to her, and then tell her I'll think about it. That will give me a few days to clear my line of credit and clear my checking and savings accounts. It went exactly as I had envisioned. First, she called me and told me I was being unreasonable, that there was no need to get lawyers involved. I told her I was tired of the neither fish nor fowl situation. You don't want to be with me, so it's time for me to accept that and move on. I agreed to meet her at Angelo's. It was the first time I'd seen her since she left me, and she looked good. I would miss her. Thunder strike me. I really do, because it was obvious to me that I still loved her. But even if she came back to me, I knew I could never live with her again. But I didn't tell her that. Instead, I sat there and listened to her feed me a line of bullshit. She's been seeing a shrink, and that shrink has been helping Peg understand, blah, blah, blah. And Peg is making good progress, and all she needs is a little more time. I know this is hard for you, baby, but it's hard for me too. Please, baby, just give me a little more time. I said I would think about it and let her know. I waited 2 days, and then called my attorney, and told him it was time to move on to step 2. He canceled the divorce papers and sent Peg a notice that the filing was canceled. Peg called me from work, thanked me, and told me I wouldn't regret it. I smiled, knowing I wouldn't regret it, but she didn't know why, but she would find out soon enough. That night, I joined Tom and Tanya for dinner. After the meal, Tanya and I retired to her bedroom, where she spread a blanket and expressed a desire to make love instead of just having closeness. She revealed that a home pregnancy test on Tuesday and a doctor's confirmation that afternoon confirmed she was pregnant, and I was going to be a father. Although our encounter was brief that night, it was a slow and enjoyable session. Afterward, I informed Tanya that I might not see her again soon, as I planned to conclude the situation with Peg and White that week, possibly requiring me to leave town for a while. Tanya urged me not to take any drastic actions, emphasizing the need for the baby's father to be around. Concerned, she speculated that my decision might be influenced by Tom's situation, and she urged me to think about it differently. Despite our recent closeness, she emphasized that just because she got what she wanted doesn't mean she doesn't still need me. The next day, Adam White, a member of the Fraternal Order of Eagles, attended the meeting and left in good spirits after discussing potential opportunities for advancement within the organization with influential members. In an equally good mood, he got out of the car in the parking lot of his house. He locked the car door, turned around, and felt a blinding pain before everything around him went black. He was found by a neighbor who called paramedics, and the paramedics who responded to the call took him to the emergency room at the hospital, where it was discovered that both of his arms and both of his legs were broken, and his genitals were damaged so severely that both of his testicles had to be removed. He was in great pain when he opened his eyes and saw that he was in a hospital room and found that he could not move. He had plaster casts on his arms and legs and was in traction. He saw Peggy standing next to his bed with a look of horror on her face before he passed out again. I wasn't present, but I received a detailed account of the events. A man entered the room, approached Peg, who stood near the bed and glanced at White. The man inquired if she was Margaret Olson, and upon her affirmative response, he handed her legal documents, informing her that she had been served. Opening the envelope, Peg discovered that she was being sued for divorce, citing infidelity as the grounds. As she read the word infidelity and observed the state of White on the bed in front of her, her face turned pale and fear overcame her expression. Realizing the implications, she exclaimed, "Oh my God!" before sitting down in a chair and breaking into tears. The police inquired about my whereabouts that night. It transpired that I was engaged in a poker game commencing an hour before the Eagles meeting, extending for an additional hour after White entered the hospital. Peg inadvertently provided an alibi, funding it without awareness. While the guys were willing to assist for free, I utilized Peg's credit as a gesture of gratitude. The Home Shopping Network obtained her Visa card number for the digital cameras gifted to Bill and Steve. eBay utilized her MasterCard for the laptop given to Mike, the 19-inch flat panel monitor for Phil, and even covered the cost of the aluminum baseball bat. I embarked on a 2-month vacation. Once the police were convinced of my innocence in White's misfortune, I ventured to Mexico for a fishing trip. Before departing, I instructed my lawyer not to press for a divorce, maintaining the status quo. I intended to stay married, yet distance myself from Peg, unless she resisted. Weekly calls to Tom and Tanya revealed Peg's return home. True love seemed absent in Peg and White's equation, as she never reconciled with him after being served next to his hospital bed. With credit card bills arriving, Peg discovered empty savings and checking accounts, a tied-up line of credit, and fake CDs in the safe deposit box. Desperate to find me, she learned from my boss, who led her to believe I left abruptly without notice. Upon demanding an appointment with my attorney, Peg discovered I had severed ties. The divorce proceedings settled his fees, and he no longer represented me. Peg had no alternative. 4 months post my fishing departure, she declared bankruptcy, losing her house, and trading her Lexus for a used Geo. Upon my return from Mexico, I rented an apartment across town, avoiding places where she might spot me. Tanya, now 5 months pregnant, and even more alluring, and I resumed our relationship without concerns about being observed. 2 or 3 times a week, we spent nights at each other's places. Peg found out about my return 2 months later, and one day, waiting for me in the parking lot after work. Ignoring her, I drove away, and she followed. Eventually, I pulled into Bud's Grill Bar parking lot, intending to talk to her away from my workplace. Already at the bar ordering a Bud Light, I observed her entering, scanning the surroundings before spotting me and making her way over while mumbling something. When she reached me, I anticipated her actions, turning on the stool, catching her hand, and squeezing it firmly. I warned her not to provoke me too much, expressing my readiness to cause her pain. After releasing her wrist, I clarified that I wasn't running away, but moving slowly and carefully to ensure she could follow me. I emphasized that discussing her actions in the parking lot where I worked was inappropriate, as everyone there already knew about her behavior. I expressed my desire to talk to her. Peg insisted she didn't want to talk, demanding her money back. I questioned her about the money, asserting that she owed me for the house and that half of everything else was rightfully mine. I refused to give it to her, justifying my stance as compensation for the pain, suffering, and loss of marital rights I endured. I recounted the 1.5 years of abstinence while she was involved with someone else, highlighting the humiliation I faced as people viewed me as a deceived husband. I accused her of making me lose my parents' house, expressing frustration and resentment. I confronted Peg, expressing skepticism about the significance of the shared assets, given her decision to live with another man. When she demanded money, I firmly rejected her request, asserting that she had attempted to manipulate me, got caught, and faced the consequences. I informed her that the court would determine the division of property, but she wouldn't receive any money from me. I outlined a strategy for the legal proceedings, explaining that once she sued, I would countersue. I emphasized the ability of a skilled lawyer to prolong the case for 6 to 8 months, during which she would be paying her attorney. I questioned her financial ability to sustain legal fees without gaining anything. I claimed to possess sufficient evidence to defend my case in court, warning her that if I won, she would suffer the consequences. In a worst-case scenario for me, I described a scenario where I would agree to divide the assets but subsequently evade payment. I highlighted the impracticality of retrieving money from me, as I had no savings or checking accounts, a leased car, and lived in a furnished apartment. I underscored that the only recourse Peg and her lawyer would have with a judgment was to garnish my paycheck. However, I warned that if my paycheck was garnished, I would lose my job, leaving her with minimal financial gain after spending years on attorney fees. All that's left is to return to the judge and face the possibility of jail for contempt of court if I refuse to comply. I informed Peg that she could expect only a postcard from a small fishing village in Mexico where I would reside until my funds ran out. I acknowledged that thanks to her, I now had something else. I urged Peg to come to terms with the fact that she had manipulated me, been caught, and faced retaliation. I suggested she consider herself fortunate, especially when reflecting on the fate of her boyfriend. I emphasized that she could still be intimate with anyone, unlike her boyfriend who had lost his masculinity and could never be with another man's wife. When Peg accused me of having a hand in what happened to Adam, I pointed out the difference between perception and proof. I questioned her about the progress of her novel, noting that she hadn't seen Adam since the first day he was in the hospital. In response to her assertion that I took away the only thing he had, I sarcastically acknowledged his well-endowed nature and prowess as a lover. I suggested that if I had known she would eventually come back to me, the entire situation could have been avoided. I ended the conversation with a tone of regret, musing about the potential for a more joyful life if we had communicated better. Peg responded with irritation, labeling me a prick, to which I retorted that she was a worthless phony. I finished my beer, stood up, sang "Bless You," and walked out of the bar. 3 days later, I received divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences. I made no objection, and she received half of the marital assets, with an order for me to repay the borrowed money. I wished her luck and discarded the final decree. She must have believed my predictions because I never heard from her again. One interesting outcome emerged from this chaos. Everyone agreed White was a prick. Even pricks can have a friend or two, and one of them was Peggy's boss. He disliked how she treated White after his misfortune, so he let her go. Well, not exactly fired. The recession necessitated downsizing, and Peggy was downsized, though everyone knew she was fired. Unable to find work locally, she moved to California, where she had relatives. No one, not even her sister, has heard from her since. Plus, there is one more chapter to this story. It was a sad ending, but, at the same time, a glorious beginning. Tanya gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and Tom adored and spoiled her. Uncle Rob became a regular visitor, spending countless hours with little Martha. Tom never revealed the full story to Tanya and me. He knew the cause of his erectile dysfunction, but kept it hidden, even from Tanya. Cancer went untreated and spread. After his funeral, Tanya handed me an envelope. On it was written, "For Rob only." I looked at her, and she shrugged, saying, "I have no idea. It's addressed to you, so I don't know what's inside." I opened it and read, "Hey buddy, if you're reading this, I'm leaving. There was a reason I chose you. Yes, it was me, not Tanya, to be the father of our child. I knew I wouldn't be there for them, and I wanted someone I could trust to watch over them. I knew I could count on you. Don't let me down, brother. Take care of our girls." I held out the letter to Tanya, and she read it and cried. I hugged her for comfort, and she asked me what I was going to do. I would do exactly what he suggested, take care of my girls. 6 months later, Tanya and I got married.
Story 4.
Diana Miller had always thought of her life as predictable. From her steady job at the library to her husband Martin's reliable schedule at the accounting firm, everything seemed to follow an orderly rhythm. It wasn't exciting, but it was stable, and Diana took comfort in that. Little did she know, subtle cracks had begun to form in the foundation of their seemingly perfect life, and these cracks would soon widen into chasms she couldn't ignore. 2 months before the incident, Martin had started working late more often. His explanations seemed logical enough: quarterly reports, a demanding client, or training new hires. But Diana noticed the strain in his eyes when he came home, the stiffness in his hugs, and the absence of the laughter they used to share. She wanted to ask if something was wrong, but the words never seemed to come out right. Dallas, their daughter, was also feeling the strain of her own life. Balancing her final year at university with a part-time job and living at home to save money wasn't easy. While she loved her parents, their quiet tensions were becoming harder to ignore. One night, after a particularly awkward family dinner, Dallas overheard her father on the phone in his office. His tone was low and somber, unlike the usual calm confidence she associated with him. Though she couldn't make out the words, it left her uneasy. Around the same time, Diana found an old photo album tucked away in a closet while searching for winter clothes. Flipping through the pictures of vacations, birthdays, and anniversaries, she felt a pang of longing for the connection she and Martin once shared. Determined to reignite their bond, she planned a surprise weekend getaway, only to have him decline due to a critical meeting at work. Martin's struggles were not as straightforward as he let on. A year earlier, he had been involved in a minor car accident while carpooling with colleagues. Though the physical injuries were negligible, the emotional toll lingered. Sleepless nights became a routine, and the growing pressure at work only added to his mental fatigue. He had seen a doctor who dismissed his symptoms as stress-related, leaving him to navigate his turmoil alone. The night before the call, Diana had noticed Martin staring blankly at the family photo wall in their living room. When she asked what was on his mind, he simply shook his head and mumbled something about needing to get some fresh air. That was the last time she saw him before going to bed. Unbeknownst to her, Martin had driven away with no clear destination, his thoughts spiraling in directions he hadn't dared to acknowledge until then. It was an hour when no one should be making calls. Diana wasn't exactly sure of the time, but the incessant ringing of the phone at such a late hour was clearly out of place. Hoping against hope that it was Marty's phone and not hers, she pressed her face into the pillow, yelling, "Really? Thanks a lot," to the stillness of the room. The noise ceased after 5 insistent rings, prompting a wave of relief to wash over her. But just as she began to relax and adjust back into her comforting position, the unwelcome sound shattered the quiet once more. "Damn it!" Diana shouted, her frustration boiling over as her eyes flew open. She sat up, glaring into the darkness. "Martin, will you just answer the damn—" Her voice trailed off when she turned to find his side of the bed empty. She glanced at the glowing numbers on the clock, 3:37 a.m. Confused, she reached for her phone on the nightstand, her mind spinning with questions. Martin had been there when they went to sleep. Where could he have gone? A sudden vibration in her hand startled her. She answered the call groggily. "Hello? Is this Diana Miller?" a calm, unfamiliar voice asked. "Yes, it is," Diana replied, her irritation growing. "Who's calling?" "Are you the wife of Martin Miller?" the voice pressed. "Yes! For God's sake, who is this and what's going on?" Diana demanded, now fully awake. "This is the emergency room at Northtown Medical Center," the voice explained. "Your husband was brought in about an hour ago. We retrieved your contact information from the incident report." "A car accident?" Diana's voice trembled as dread washed over her. "Oh my God, is he all right?" "I'm sorry, ma'am," the caller said, their tone professional but firm. "I can't discuss his condition over the phone. We need you to come in immediately." "Yes, of course," Diana said, already scrambling to get out of bed. "I'm on my way." Diana bolted from her bed and rushed upstairs to her daughter's room. Dallas, who had been named after the city where she was conceived, was in her final year at a local university and lived at home to save money. She had once enjoyed the freedom of dorm life, but eventually chose the quieter environment of her family home to focus on her studies. "Dallas, wake up," Diana called softly, shaking her shoulder. No response. "Dal, wake up," she repeated, this time with more urgency, giving her shoulder another shake. Still nothing. "Dallas, wake up," Diana practically yelled. Startled, Dallas sat up groggily, blinking against the light her mother had just turned on. "Your dad's been in an accident," Diana said quickly. "He's in the ER. Get up and get dressed. We have to go now." Without hesitation, Dallas slid out of bed and began pulling on clothes, oblivious to her state of undress. Diana didn't notice either. She was too preoccupied rummaging through drawers to grab what her daughter might need. Once ready, they rushed out of the house and drove to the hospital. The normally short 10-minute drive felt endless as Dallas bombarded her mother with questions she couldn't answer. When they arrived, a nurse directed them to Martin's room. The sight of him hit them like a blow. He was covered in bandages, unconscious, and hooked to monitors. A nurse handed Diana some paperwork to fill out, a harsh reminder that even in moments of crisis, administrative tasks never wait. Dallas moved a chair close to her father's bed, her face pale with worry. About an hour later, 2 police officers entered the room, a man and a woman, both in uniform. "Good evening, ma'am," the woman began, her tone professional but sympathetic. "I'm Officer Gail Stanton, and this is my partner, Robert Hansen. We were the first responders at the scene." Diana stood, her anxiety evident. "Do you know how he's doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. She gestured toward the young woman at her side. "No one's told us anything yet." "Oh, and this is my daughter, Dallas." Officer Stanton shook her head gently. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have any updates on his condition," she said. "We're here to ask a few questions. I know this is a difficult time, but it's important we gather information as soon as possible." Diana hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead." "Do you have any idea why your husband might have been out so late?" Stanton asked. "No," Diana said firmly, her expression resolute. "We went to bed together around 10 p.m. I had no idea he'd even left until the hospital called." Officer Stanton turned to Dallas. "Dallas, can you confirm that?" "Yes," Dallas replied, her voice steady but quiet. "We all watched a movie together, and then we went to bed. I saw Dad go into the bedroom with Mom." "What movie was it?" Stanton asked, her tone conversational but focused. Dallas hesitated, searching her memory. Something with Keanu Reeves, an action movie. It was Dad's pick, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Officer Stanton exchanged a glance with her partner before continuing. Were there any issues at home recently? Financial struggles, marital problems? No, Diana said, shaking her head. Nothing unusual, nothing serious. Are you absolutely sure? Stanton pressed. Yes, I can't imagine why he'd leave without telling me. Were there other people involved? Was anyone else hurt? Diana asked anxiously. That's the thing, ma'am, Stanton said carefully. There wasn't another car involved. Witnesses saw your husband's vehicle suddenly accelerate before crashing head-on into a large oak tree at the corner of highways 121 and 288. There were no skid marks and no one reported seeing brake lights. Diana and Dallas froze, exchanging wide-eyed glances as the implications of Stanton's words became clear. Are you suggesting my husband did this on purpose? Diana asked, her voice cracking. You think he tried to... We're considering all possibilities, Stanton said calmly. We'll need to examine the car for mechanical issues and speak with your husband when he regains consciousness. You're wrong, Diana said, tears streaming down her face. There has to be another explanation. Maybe he fell asleep or lost control. It was so late. Stanton placed her card on the table and told them to call if they remembered anything else. After the officers left, Dallas quietly shut the door. You didn't tell them, Dallas said softly. No, Diana replied, her voice steady despite the tears. It's not their business. If your father chooses to say something, that's up to him. Until then, we wait. The following days dragged by at a snail's pace. Martin remained unconscious and under close observation in the hospital. Diana and Dallas spent as much time by his side as they could, ensuring he was never left alone. They often took turns keeping vigil, their focus entirely on Martin's recovery. Diana, who knew Martin's boss personally, made a call to inform him of the situation and that Martin would be unable to work for a while. She was careful with her words, avoiding anything that could hint at the possibility of a deliberate act. The accident had occurred late Saturday night, and it wasn't until Wednesday morning that Martin began showing signs of waking up. By midday, his eyes fluttered open, although his movements were limited. Diana, who was in the room at the time, noticed his eyes opening and rushed to his bedside to reassure him that everything would be okay. Moments later, a nurse hurried in, alerted by the monitors. Diana stepped back to give the nurse space, watching as more doctors arrived to assess Martin's condition. Taking the opportunity, she slipped out of the room to call Dallas and share the news. When her daughter didn't answer, Diana left a voicemail. As the day went on, much of the medical equipment attached to Martin was removed. Though his left arm was in a cast, his right-handedness meant it wouldn't hinder him too much. With his throat still sore from the breathing tube, he was provided with a whiteboard to communicate. He scribbled a message, and when the nurse read it, she paused to confirm with him. Martin nodded firmly. The nurse then stepped into the hallway, her expression serious. Moments later, she returned and approached Diana with an apologetic tone. Mrs. Miller, I need to inform you that your husband has requested you and your daughter not be allowed back into his room. What? Diana's voice wavered in disbelief. He's my husband. I have every right to be with him. I'm sorry, but the patient's wishes take precedence, the nurse explained gently. Let me speak to him. I'm sure we can work this out, Diana pleaded, trying to move past the nurse. When she was stopped, her desperation turned into shouting. Martin! Martin, please talk to me. What's going on? Martin! Mrs. Miller, the nurse said firmly. Please stop yelling. You're disturbing other patients. You may wait outside, but if you try to enter the room again or continue making noise, we'll have to ask you to leave the building. Do I make myself clear? Yes, I understand, Diana muttered, defeated. She sank into a chair outside the room, her head in her hands. About 45 minutes later, Dallas arrived at the hospital and found her mother sitting in the hallway, looking distraught. Mom, what are you doing out here? Dallas asked. Your father doesn't want either of us in the room, Diana replied quietly. Us? Dallas repeated, confused. I mean, I get why he'd ban you, but why me? Diana's head snapped up. What the hell is that supposed to mean? And why did it take you so long to get here? Dallas hesitated. Well, Bradley came over to check on me, and we're kind of... God, don't tell me you were with your boyfriend while your father's in the hospital, Diana interrupted, her voice sharp. Dallas shrugged. He was unconscious when I left, and I needed to relax. It's been stressful, okay? For what it's worth, you might want to consider doing the same. I don't want to hear it, Dallas, Diana said, her tone icy. Let's not discuss this right now. It's inappropriate. Dallas smirked at the irony, but said nothing. Their tense conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a tall, polished brunette. She wore professional attire, though her badge indicated she wasn't a doctor. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," the woman said as she entered Martin's room. "I'm Dr. Lassiter, one of the mental health specialists here. How are you feeling today?" "As well as can be expected," Martin replied, his voice still raspy but steady. 9 days had passed since the accident, and Martin had regained the ability to speak. The whiteboard was no longer needed, though his questions about when he could be discharged were met with vague answers. "The hospital asked me to check in with you," Dr. Lassiter continued. "Do I have a choice?" Martin asked, his tone resigned. "Not if you're hoping to go home soon," she replied with a wry smile. "Shall we begin?" Dr. Lassiter pulled a chair closer to his bed, crossing her legs as she reviewed his file. After a few moments, she looked up. "You were admitted here following a collision with a tree. I also see that you've restricted visits from your wife and daughter. I can't help but wonder if there's a connection." Martin nodded slightly. "She cheated on me." Dr. Lassiter sighed softly. "Infidelity is unfortunately common, though it doesn't usually lead to something as extreme as this. Is there more to the story?" Martin sat quietly, his gaze fixed on the ceiling as if searching for the words he didn't want to say. The silence stretched for minutes. He hated discussing his feelings, especially with an attractive woman. The thought crossed his mind, couldn't they have sent an older man for this? But Dr. Lassiter waited patiently, her calm demeanor betraying no irritation. She had seen this hesitation countless times before. Eventually, her patience paid off. "I think I've been dealing with depression," Martin finally admitted. "Not officially diagnosed or anything, but it's been hanging over me for a while." "Do you know what triggered it? Or has it just been a general feeling?" Dr. Lassiter asked gently. He hesitated again, then sighed. "I couldn't get an boner. It started about a year after an accident." She nodded, encouraging him to continue without judgment. "Go on." "It wasn't even a bad accident," Martin explained. "I was in the back seat. My boss was in the passenger seat, and his boss was driving. Someone rear-ended us. There wasn't much damage, no airbags deployed, nothing serious. But I wasn't braced for it, and I hit my head on the seat in front of me. That's where it all started, I think." Dr. Lassiter glanced at her notes and spoke evenly. "The report mentions a mild concussion." The man across from her nodded. "Yeah, my doctors ran every test you could imagine. They even repeated some. No one could pinpoint the exact cause. The best explanation I got was that something happened. Some part of my brain was damaged, and it affected, well, that." Dr. Lassiter leaned forward slightly, her tone probing but empathetic. "And that led to difficulties in your marriage," she said, piecing the story together. "Your wife wasn't satisfied with your bed life, which eventually led to her having an affair. Am I right?" "In a nutshell, yeah," he replied, his voice subdued. "How long after the accident did this start?" she asked. 7 or 8 months, maybe. We tried to work around it using, certain aids." He paused, embarrassed. "I understand, Mr. Miller. No need to explain further," she said with a small smile. "At first it seemed fine," Martin continued, his voice quieter. "We thought it would be temporary, that I'd eventually recover. We used to talk about how, once I was better, we'd spend a whole weekend in bed together. Just the two of us. But that day never came. And after a while, she decided to meet her needs elsewhere." "Did she discuss it with you beforehand?" Dr. Lassiter asked, her tone measured. Martin shook his head, his voice tinged with bitterness. "No. I found out by accident, came home from work early one day. Total cliché, I know. She was in our bedroom with him, and my daughter and her boyfriend were there too." Dr. Lassiter raised her eyebrows, surprised. "Were they together?" "No, thank God," Martin replied quickly. "Diana and Bill were in the bedroom, and Dallas and Brad were in the living room. That's how I found out. My wife was cheating on me, and my daughter not only knew about it, but seemed fine with it." Dr. Lassiter leaned back, processing his words. "That explains why your daughter isn't allowed in the room either," she said thoughtfully. "Yeah," Martin confirmed, his expression darkening. "Oh, and Bill? He's Brad's father. We knew him before, just as Brad's dad. I later found out it was Dallas who suggested Bill to Diana. That was another blow." "Did you confront them?" Dr. Lassiter asked. "Not really," Martin admitted, letting out a sharp breath. "If Dallas hadn't been there, I probably would have confronted Diana. But I'd already seen enough of my daughter's anatomy that day, so I just left." Dr. Lassiter's expression softened. but she pressed on. "And when you finally spoke to your wife?" "She didn't deny it," Martin said, his voice heavy with resignation. "She said she was sorry, I knew, but made it clear she wasn't sorry for what she'd done. Her argument was simple. If I couldn't meet her needs, she had the right to find someone who could. And she wanted someone consistent, not random flings. Bill was single, so he fit the bill, no pun intended." Dr. Lassiter gave a small nod, her voice gentle. "How did that make you feel?" "What could I say?" Martin shrugged bitterly. "She wasn't wrong. I couldn't give her what she needed. It wasn't her fault, and I didn't blame her for wanting a normal bed life. But it still hurt." "If she'd asked your permission beforehand, would you have agreed?" Dr. Lassiter asked. "I've thought about that a lot," Martin admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "Part of me wants to say yes, because I loved her and wanted her to be happy, but I don't think I could have handled it. We made vows, in sickness and in health. I wouldn't have done that to her, and it eliminated me that she did it to me." Dr. Lassiter nodded, her tone calm but probing. "And after you found out?" Martin sighed, his frustration evident. "She stopped hiding it. Before, it was only during the day when I was at work. After I knew it included weekends, trips to the store, she was with him more openly." "That must have been incredibly difficult," Dr. Lassiter said gently, her expression sympathetic. "Difficult doesn't begin to cover it," Martin said bitterly. "But I didn't see what else I could do. She deserved happiness, and I couldn't provide it. It ate away at me." Dr. Lassiter leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about the night of the accident." Martin exhaled slowly. "We watched a movie as a family. I kept my feelings bottled up. I thought it was better not to burden them with my pain. They said goodnight. Diana kissed me. Dallas hugged me. But I realized Dallas didn't respect me anymore. Not as a father or a man, and I couldn't blame her. I didn't respect myself either." He paused before continuing. "I got ready for bed, same as always. Diana fell asleep. I waited, then got dressed, grabbed my wallet and keys, went upstairs. I looked in on Dallas. She was asleep. I blew her a kiss and whispered goodbye. Then I got in my car." "And?" Dr. Lassiter prompted gently. "I didn't have a specific plan," Martin admitted. "I drove aimlessly at first. Then I remembered the big oak tree. I drove past it once, then circled back. It was perfect. No obstacles, a clear path. I floored it and aimed straight for it." The room fell silent, as both Martin and Dr. Lassiter absorbed the weight of his story. After a moment, she spoke. "Mr. Miller, thank you for trusting me with this. It's not easy to share something so deeply personal. I'd like to come back tomorrow to continue our conversation, if that's all right." Martin smirked faintly. "I'm not going anywhere." After shaking hands with Dr. Lassiter, Martin watched her leave the room. He picked up his phone, which Diana had brought from home, despite his earlier instructions not to. Sorting through messages and emails, he replied to a few, including one to his boss to share an update on his condition. Then, setting the phone aside, he closed his eyes, hoping for some much-needed rest. Back at home, Diana wrestled with her thoughts. She convinced herself that Martin was okay with her relationship with Bill, that he had tacitly accepted it as an act of love, a way to make her happy. When she first learned about the crash, she doubted it was an accident, but now she was less sure. Diana suspected the police might have questioned Martin, though she hoped he hadn't mentioned Bill. Not that it mattered much. Infidelity wasn't a crime. Perhaps the authorities had chalked the crash up to a failed self-destruction attempt and moved on. Case closed. Still, Martin had never outwardly objected, had he? If he had, she couldn't recall. And she wasn't about to give up her personal life just because of a freak accident. Celibacy wasn't what she signed up for, and she wasn't about to accept it now. Once Martin was home, she decided she'd tread more carefully, perhaps tone down her meetings with Bill, but she wouldn't end the relationship entirely. The next morning, Dr. Lassiter returned as promised. Martin noticed her more casual outfit, but couldn't summon much interest. He gave her a polite nod as she entered. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Miller?" she asked with a warm smile. "About the same as yesterday, Doc," Martin replied with a faint shrug. "I'd love to go home, but I guess that's not up to me." Dr. Lassiter offered a reassuring smile. "Well, partially. State law requires a 72-hour hold after incidents like yours. The clock started with our conversation yesterday, so you've got about 2 days left." "That's fine, Doc. The food here isn't terrible, so I'll survive," Martin said with a small chuckle. They shared a brief laugh. "It's good to see you joking," Dr. Lassiter said. "That's a positive sign." "I think so too," Martin said, nodding. It's been a while since I felt like myself. Months, really. I used to be a jokester, always teasing Dallas. It drove her nuts. Dr. Lassiter tilted her head slightly, her expression thoughtful. Have you had any darker thoughts since our last conversation? Any lingering regrets? Martin shook his head. Not really, Doc. The depression has lifted a bit. It's been replaced by anger and disappointment, mostly with Diana, a little with Dallas, but mostly with myself. I let things go too far. I never stood up for myself, never told Diana her behavior was unacceptable. Dr. Lassiter met his gaze steadily. Do you plan to take that stand now? Absolutely, Martin said firmly. As much as I've thought about divorce, I have to admit I bear some responsibility for letting her walk all over me. If she agrees to stop seeing Bill, I'm willing to go to counseling and work on our marriage. Dr. Lassiter tilted her head thoughtfully. That's a significant shift in perspective. It's rare to see such a quick turnaround. Martin shrugged. I had a lot of time to think while lying here before we talked. Being able to share my feelings with you helped me sort through them. I'm grateful for that. Good to hear, Mr. Miller. I think we've made excellent progress. I'll check in with you tomorrow, but I don't see any reason why you can't be discharged as planned. Thanks, Doc. I'm looking forward to getting out of here. When Martin was finally discharged, Diana and Dallas were there to take him home. Determined to turn over a new leaf, Martin decided to act as though things were already changing, even if they weren't quite there yet. The next week passed uneventfully. The airbags had done their job during the crash, and aside from a concussion that left him sensitive to light and sound, Martin's injuries were manageable. The TV stayed off, and soft music played quietly in the background as he rested. Diana and Dallas seemed eager to help, doting on him whenever he needed something. For a brief moment, things felt almost normal. Then, one afternoon, Diana announced casually, I need to go shopping. No, Martin said calmly, his tone steady but firm. Diana blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me? I said no, Martin repeated. If we need something, make a list and Dallas can go. Dallas, lounging nearby, frowned. Why are you dragging me into this? She protested. I have plans with Bradley. Then you'd better finish quickly, Martin replied evenly, turning his attention back to Diana. Diana, the list! Diana's face hardened. This is ridiculous. You can't just come home and start making demands. Dallas has plans, and I always do the shopping. That's final. Martin's expression darkened, his voice cutting through the room. Do you think I don't know these shopping trips are an excuse to see Bill? Her face froze mid-protest. What are you talking about? She asked cautiously. You've used groceries as a cover for too long, Diana, Martin said, his tone low but unrelenting. I see it in your eyes when you look at me, or rather when you don't. I notice the extra makeup, the nicer clothes. It's obvious, and it stops now. Diana stared at him in shock, her composure slipping. Even Dallas glanced at her father, her expression a mix of surprise and grudging respect. Marty, please, Diana said after a moment, her voice trembling. We've talked about this before. I'll try to be more discreet, but I'm not giving him up. I have the right to a bed life, and I intend to keep it. Martin's jaw tightened, his voice heavy with hurt. So our vows meant nothing? In sickness and in health. Was that just empty words to you? I'm sorry, but this isn't what I agreed to, Diana shot back. It's not my fault you can't give me what I need. I've done nothing wrong. I'm going shopping, and yes, I'll see Bill. If you want to talk about it tonight, fine. With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The house fell silent. Dallas glanced at her father, who stood frozen in place. Without a word, Martin turned and walked to his bedroom, leaving the rest unsaid. For the first time in her life, Dallas Miller felt a gnawing anxiety about her family's future. Her parents' marriage, once the stable center of her world, now seemed precariously close to collapse. Her father had never truly confronted her mother before, and despite their struggles, nothing as serious as this had ever come between them. Deciding that the situation was beyond her control, she wiped her tears, pulled herself together, and left to meet Bradley. Meanwhile, Diana was grappling with conflicting feelings. A part of her hoped Martin would never fully recover, knowing deep down she might not be able to give up Bill. Bill was everything Marty wasn't, forceful, unyielding, and unapologetically direct. Marty, on the other hand, was gentle, caring, and predictable, and yet it was that very tenderness that now felt stifling to her. As night fell, Dallas returned home and found her father lying in bed. A faint light spilled from the slightly open bathroom door, the dim glow casting soft shadows across the room. She realized he had left the bathroom light on because the lamps in his room were too bright. "Dad?" she called softly. Martin didn't turn to face her, but responded, "Dallas, I'm sorry." His voice caught her off guard, and she moved closer, noticing the weight in his tone. She stood in the doorway, tears welling in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. Martin hesitated. Since learning of her role in facilitating Diana's affair, he had stopped using the affectionate nicknames he once called her. Even now, as he saw the tears in her eyes, he couldn't help but wonder if this was genuine or a calculated attempt to win his favor. Still, he decided to hear her out. Dallas stepped closer, standing at the foot of the bed. "I'm sorry for what I did, Dad. I thought I was helping Mom. She was so upset about everything you were going through. About how you couldn't—" She paused, her eyes meeting his. "You know, you couldn't." Martin nodded slightly, allowing her to continue. "Bradley's dad was going through the same thing after Mrs. Coyle died. He always talked about how lonely he was. I thought they could help each other. I never thought about how it would hurt you. I was just trying to make things easier for Mom." "Is that why you did it?" Martin asked, his voice cautious. He wasn't sure if this sudden confession was sincere, but he decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. "Yes," Dallas admitted, her voice cracking. "I thought I was helping. I didn't realize how much damage I was causing." For a moment, their eyes met, and Martin managed a faint smile. "It's over now, Dally. I won't let this happen again." "I hope so," she said, wiping her tears. "I need you, Dad. Are you going to divorce Mom?" "I haven't decided yet," Martin said honestly. "It depends on whether she's willing to end things with Bill. But don't say anything. If she changes, it has to be because she wants to, not because she's pressured." Dallas nodded. "Okay, Dad, I should head upstairs." "Oh, I broke up with Bradley tonight." Martin raised an eyebrow, surprised. He had never liked Bradley much, but hadn't expected this. "Why?" Dallas hesitated before answering. "Because my dad told me once that he wasn't good enough for me. And tonight, I realized he was right." "You were right, Dad, about a lot of things." A small smile spread across Martin's face. For the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of pride. Dallas leaned forward and hugged him tightly, a rare moment of closeness they hadn't shared in years. When they pulled apart, she smiled softly and left the room, heading upstairs. The sound of her bedroom door closing was soon followed by the familiar chirp of Diana's car unlocking. The warmth Martin had just felt was instantly replaced with a cold dread. He closed his eyes, bracing himself for what was to come. A few moments later, Diana walked into the bedroom, her hair damp and her skin freshly scrubbed. Martin suspected she had showered at Bill's house, an effort, no doubt, to return home without lingering evidence of her infidelity. "Can you help with the groceries?" she asked, her tone casual. "Are there actually groceries?" Martin asked, sitting up slowly. "Yes, Marty. I told you I went shopping, and I did." He followed her to the car, unloading the bags and placing them on the counter. As he unpacked, he noticed a glaring absence of perishable items. A receipt tucked into one of the bags caught his attention. It was time-stamped nearly 2 hours ago. "First I went shopping," Diana said, as though reading his thoughts. "Then I went to see Bill." Though he had expected as much, hearing her say it stung. Martin finished unpacking in silence and retreated to the bedroom, his mind racing. There was no point in arguing. It wouldn't change her behavior. Diana had made her intentions clear. Now, the next move was his. A few minutes later, Diana entered the bedroom, her tone softer. "Did you want to talk?" "No, Diana," Martin said flatly. "You've made your position very clear." Diana hesitated. She loved her husband. He was her best friend and the person she trusted most. But she didn't believe her need for closeness should be an issue, given the circumstances. She hoped Martin would come to see it the same way. Sensing his resolve, she sighed and moved toward her closet. She had briefly considered rekindling some closeness with Martin, but tonight wasn't the night. By the time she returned, dressed for bed, Martin appeared to be asleep, or at least pretending to be. Diana climbed into bed, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavily in the air. For now, they both remained in limbo, teetering on the edge of decisions that could either shatter their family or begin to rebuild it. The divorce was anything but smooth. Diana was enraged when the papers were served, and Marty, ever considerate, chose to have them delivered to the house while he spent the day with Dallas. After moving into the guest room next to Dallas's upstairs bedroom, Diana dug in her heels. She hired a fiercely aggressive attorney who pulled out all the stops, including an attempt to declare Marty mentally unfit, citing the incident with the tree as a self-destruction attempt. Anticipating such a move and believing it wise regardless, Marty had already begun seeing a well-regarded psychologist by the time the papers were filed. The psychologist's testimony that Marty was stable and no longer a self-destruction risk quickly dismantled that argument, and the judge sided with him. The legal battle might have dragged on indefinitely, but when Diana seemed ready to escalate further, Dallas stepped in. She confronted her mother, making it clear that Diana's actions had crossed a line. "Mom, your needs don't outweigh the promises you made. Life isn't fair, but you vowed to stand by Dad even when it's hard. If you keep fighting this, it's going to ruin our relationship. Maybe forever." Faced with the prospect of losing both her husband and daughter, Diana reluctantly stopped contesting the divorce. The house was sold, and Marty agreed to several years of alimony, knowing the court would have ordered it anyway. Diana rented a 2-bedroom apartment near her job and resumed working full-time 8 months after the divorce was finalized. But the ordeal left her bitter, especially when Bill unceremoniously ended their relationship. Apparently, Bill had been seeing other women, and Diana's appeal diminished once she was no longer married. Dallas continued her studies, splitting her time between her parents' homes. Over time, Diana began to play the sufferer, repeatedly blaming Marty for the divorce. One evening, as Diana once again lamented, "If only he had been more understanding," Dallas lost her temper. "Did you ever think about Dad?" she shouted, silencing her mother. It was a Friday night, and Marty found himself walking into a dimly lit club around 10 p.m. He wasn't looking for anything serious, just a distraction. A few drinks, maybe a dance or two, and a chance to unwind. Settling at the bar, he ordered a rum and coke and scanned the crowd. His eyes landed on a woman at the far end of the bar. Something about her seemed familiar. She had long, dark brown hair, and her dress barely concealed her curves. An almost empty glass of wine sat in front of her. Curious, Marty studied her until recognition dawned. A small smile tugged at his lips as he picked up his drink and walked over. The woman noticed him as he approached. "Dr. Lassiter?" he said, testing the waters. She studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to place him. For a moment, Marty thought he might have been mistaken. "I'm off duty," she said at last, a small smile playing on her lips. "Here, I'm just Vicky. But I think you've got me at a disadvantage." Marty chuckled, leaning back slightly. "It's been a while. You probably see far more patients than I see psychologists." "I'm usually better with names than faces," Vicky said with a playful challenge. "Test me." "Martin Miller," he said, watching her carefully. She paused, tilting her head in thought, and for a moment Marty was certain she wouldn't remember. But then her expression shifted, and a spark of recognition lit her eyes. "Ah, Mr. Miller," she said with a teasing grin. "An unfaithful wife and an unfortunate encounter with a tree, if I recall correctly." "That's me," Marty replied, impressed. "I can't believe you remember. It's been almost 2 years. Sometimes I get lucky," Vicky said with a shrug. She motioned to the empty seat beside her. "Care to join me?" Marty nodded, sliding onto the bar stool as he gestured for the bartender to refill their drinks. "So, what brings you here tonight?" he asked. "Dating someone?" "I'm trying," Vicky replied, a playful glint in her eye. "Really? I thought I remembered a pretty impressive ring on your finger." "That was then," she said with a nonchalant shrug. "The divorce was finalized not long after we spoke. My ex-husband had more in common with a 20-year-old cashier and her friends than with me. I couldn't convince him otherwise." "Wow," Marty said, raising an eyebrow. "Are they still together?" She laughed lightly, shaking her head. "You'd be surprised, Marty, but once the papers were signed, I stopped caring about Wayne's marital status." "Fair enough," Marty said, smiling. "And please, call me Marty, or Martin. Anything but Mr. Miller." "What did your wife call you?" Vicky asked, her tone sly and teasing. "Marty," he admitted with a grin. "Well then, Marty," Vicky said, standing and offering her hand. "Care to take me for a spin on the dance floor?" "With pleasure," he said. He asked the bartender to hold their drinks, then led Vicky by the hand to the dance floor. The music was upbeat, and they quickly fell into rhythm. 2 fast songs gave way to a slower one, and they stayed on the floor, moving closer. Vicky wrapped her arms around Marty's neck, and he placed his hands firmly on her back. As they swayed to the music, Marty couldn't help but notice the softness of her body and the faint, intoxicating scent of her perfume. When the song ended, Vicky leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear. "Martin, I'm tired of dancing," she whispered, "but I'm also very lonely. Maybe you can help me with that." Marty didn't hesitate. He took her hand, led her back to the bar, and paid the tab. The bartender didn't seem surprised. Outside, they got into Marty's car. Vicky had arrived via Uber, which made the decision easy. "Maybe I should have asked earlier," Marty said, glancing at her. "But how much did you drink?" "It was my first glass of wine when you walked up." "Why?" "Because I don't take advantage of drunk women," he said. "Don't worry," she said with a warm smile. "I know exactly what I'm doing, Martin." Martin pulled his car into the underground parking garage and guided Vicky to the elevator. She clung to his arm, and they exchanged several passionate kisses as they ascended to his floor. The tension between them was electric, and as soon as the door to his apartment clicked shut behind them, Vicky wasted no time. She grabbed the hem of her dress and pulled it over her head in one swift motion. "Wow, Vicky," Martin said, his voice low with awe. "You're stunning," she smirked. "Thanks, Martin, but are you just going to stand there and stare?" "Absolutely not." "Good. Then show me where your bedroom is." Taking her hand, Martin led her down the hallway. He felt a twinge of relief knowing Dallas was spending the weekend at her mother's place. "I hope you've got rubbers," Vicky teased as they stepped into the room. Martin opened his nightstand drawer, revealing a small stash, which he placed on the nightstand. They didn't waste any time. For over an hour, the two of them lost themselves in each other, the chemistry undeniable. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Martin on his back and Vicky nestled against his side. The room was quiet, and they drifted in that comfortable space between wakefulness and sleep. Vicky stirred first, raising her head slightly. "Martin," she murmured. He responded sleepily. "I just remembered something from your story," she said, her voice curious. "There was some mention of erectile dysfunction. Care to explain?" Martin chuckled softly. "Well, that's clearly no longer a problem." Vicky smiled but pressed on. "What happened?" "A few months after the oak tree incident," Martin began, choosing his words carefully, "I started feeling this odd tingling sensation. It reminded me of how people describe a paralyzed limb regaining feeling. It went on for weeks." "Were you still married then?" Vicky asked. "Did you tell Diana?" "We were technically still married, but we'd been living apart for a while," Martin replied. "And no, I didn't tell her. It wasn't her business at that point. Over the next several months, things started working again. Sporadic at first, but then more consistently. By 8 or 9 months, everything was back to normal." "What did the doctors say?" "They were baffled," Martin admitted, shaking his head. "They ran every test imaginable, compared scans from before and after, and couldn't find a definitive explanation. Their best guess was that the impact with the tree somehow reset something in my brain. But honestly, they didn't know for sure." "Well," Vicky said with a sly smile, "whatever the reason, I'm grateful. I hope you don't mind if I stay the night." "Not at all," Martin replied with a grin, "as long as there's more Zex in the morning, followed by breakfast." "Deal," Vicky said, settling back down against him. They drifted off to sleep, but before long, Martin stirred again, his voice soft in the darkness. "Vicky?" She replied sleepily. "Do you think you're ready for something serious? A real relationship?" There was a long pause, and Martin's heart sank as he worried he had overstepped. For a moment, he thought she might get up and leave, but she stayed. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "Can we talk about it in the morning?" "Of course," Martin said gently. "Good night, Vicky." "Good night, Martin," she replied, her tone warm and reassuring. Vicky woke first and let Martin sleep while she took a shower. She wandered into the kitchen and began searching for something to make for breakfast. Martin's question lingered in her mind. She hadn't been looking for anything serious, just some fun and companionship. But the truth was, she liked Martin a lot. For months, she'd told herself she didn't need a man in her life. But now she wasn't so sure. The smell of cooking woke Martin. He stumbled into the kitchen to find Vicky wearing his shirt from the night before and an apron she'd found in a closet. "I was going to invite you to breakfast," he teased. "Looks like you beat me to it." "You can take me to lunch," she quipped. "Go take a quick shower. Breakfast will be ready when you're done." 10 minutes later, Martin returned to find the table set with an omelet, sausages, and buttered toast. "I didn't even know I had sausages in the freezer," he said, sitting down. "They were buried," Vicky said with a grin. "I hope it's edible." Martin took a bite and smiled. "It's delicious." They ate quietly, chatting about trivial things. Afterward, Martin took charge of cleaning up while Vicky sat on the couch. When he finished, he turned to her. "Are you ready to talk now?" he asked. "Mostly," Vicky said, standing and holding out her hand. "But can we do it in the bedroom? I'll be more comfortable there." They sat on the bed facing each other, Vicky holding Martin's hands tightly. "Martin, I need to be honest with you. I think you're amazing, and I definitely like you, but there's something you should know." He nodded for her to continue. "My ex-husband didn't just leave me for a younger woman. The main reason was because I can't have children. He wanted kids, his own kids, and left to find someone who could give them to him. He refused to consider adoption. After the divorce, I felt like a failure." Martin squeezed her hands. "Vicky, I'm over 40. I have an adult daughter. I wouldn't mind kids, but it's not a deal breaker." She exhaled, relief softening her expression. "Thank you for saying that. One more thing. After my divorce, I wasn't in a good place. Losing my husband to someone half my age really shook my confidence. I started to feel old." "You're 37, Martin said gently. "You're not old." "I know," she said with a small laugh. "But at the time, I let myself believe it. I don't know if I'm ready for something serious, but I know I want to see where this could go." Martin smiled. That's all I needed to hear. They both chuckled softly, the tension in the room easing. "I used to feel incomplete," Vicky began, her voice steady but introspective. "It's hard to explain, but I didn't feel like a woman. How could I? When I couldn't have children. I know it's not logical, but that's how I felt back then. So I tried to prove to myself that I was still a woman, if not through motherhood, then through being desirable. I reinvented myself as Angela and started going home with men, most of them strangers. It was empowering at first, but eventually it felt self-destructive. I started seeing a therapist and slowed down, but it took time before I could stop entirely." Martin considered her words, choosing his next carefully. "Isn't that what you were doing last night?" he asked gently, making it clear he wasn't judging her. "You looked like you were on the prowl." Vicky smiled ruefully. "Yes, I suppose I was. I have needs, Martin, just like any woman. But I've become more selective. I only go home with someone when I feel a real connection. There are plenty of nights I return home alone and take care of things myself." "Well, I'm glad I passed the test," Martin said with a playful grin. "You did?" Vicky replied warmly. "And, to answer your earlier question, I'd like to explore where this might go. But I want to be honest about my past. I was fortunate. Despite my behavior, I never contracted anything. I've been tested regularly, and I can provide proof if it would help you feel comfortable. I don't need birth control, but I'd like us both to get tested and agree to exclusivity if we're going to move forward." Martin sat quietly, processing everything she had said. Vicky waited, her patience masking her nervousness. Finally, he spoke. "Thank you for trusting me with this," he said. "I know that couldn't have been easy. I think I owe you the same honesty. Our situations aren't so different." Vicky tilted her head, intrigued, as Martin continued. "After my divorce, I felt relieved at first, but then the depression hit. I couldn't see a future for myself. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone, especially since my condition hadn't improved. My therapist suggested that as I aged, I might find women who valued companionship over physical closeness. But when my body started recovering, unexpectedly I might add, I felt the need to prove I was still a man. I went out looking for women, not to connect, but to validate myself." He sighed. "I wasn't very picky. Some of the women, well, let's just say I made some questionable choices. It caught up with me when I ended up with gonorrhea. That was a wake-up call. My doctor and therapist both helped me reassess my behavior. It's been years since I've been with anyone without protection, and I'd be happy to get tested for us." Vicky smiled, her eyes warm with understanding. "So are we doing this, you and me?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Absolutely," Martin replied with a grin. Over the next few months, Martin and Vicky's relationship grew stronger. They spent nearly every night together, splitting time between their homes. Vicky got along well with Dallas, and it seemed only a matter of time before they married. The inevitable confrontation with Diana happened about 3 months into their relationship. Martin and Vicky were at a club catering to a more mature crowd, enjoying drinks and conversation when Martin's expression abruptly changed. His smile faded as he looked past Vicky. She turned to follow his gaze and saw a familiar face heading their way, Diana. Diana approached the table with a smirk. Though the divorce had been finalized over a year ago, she still harbored bitterness. In her mind, she'd done nothing wrong beyond being too open about her affair. The fact that Martin had moved on only fueled her resentment. "Marty," Diana said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "What a surprise." "Diana," Martin replied evenly, then turned to Vicky. "This is my ex-wife, Diana. Diana, this is Vicky." "Nice to meet you, Diana," Vicky said politely, her tone firm. "I've heard a lot about you." "Well, I've heard absolutely nothing about you," Diana retorted bitterly. "We're divorced, Diana," Martin said calmly. "It's been over a year. My life is no longer your concern. If you don't mind—" He left the implication hanging, inviting her to leave. "Oh, of course, Martin," Diana replied with mock sweetness. Then, turning to Vicky, she added, "But before I go, there's something you should know." "And what's that?" Vicky asked, arching an eyebrow. "You probably don't want to get too involved with him," Diana said smugly. "We divorced because he couldn't perform." Martin watched Vicky closely, curious how she would handle the situation. To his surprise, she suppressed a laugh and turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "Is that true, Martin?" she teased. "I don't think you mentioned this." Martin shrugged. It was her moment to handle as she pleased. Diana's satisfaction evaporated when Vicky replied with a mischievous smile. "Well, if what I experienced last night wasn't real, then a real one would probably eliminate me." Diana's jaw dropped. "Wait, what? Marty, you're not saying it works now?" "Like a champion," Martin said evenly. "Just as good as ever." "How is that possible? Did the doctors find a cure?" Diana demanded, visibly flustered. "They think it just needed time to recover," Martin replied, his tone growing firmer. "If you'd been patient and honored our vows, we might still be married." Diana stood speechless for several moments before finally whispering, "I'm sorry, Marty. I was selfish and short-sighted. I ruined a good marriage." Without waiting for a response, Diana turned and left the club. Martin and Vicky watched her go, both feeling a twinge of pity. Then Martin turned back to Vicky. "Let's dance," he said softly. 6 months later, Martin and Vicky married in an intimate ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family. It wasn't the beginning of a new life. It was the continuation of one they had both fought to rebuild, together. In the years that followed, Martin and Vicky built a life together grounded in trust, healing, and mutual respect. Their shared experiences, marked by loss, recovery, and new beginnings, gave them a bond neither had anticipated but both deeply cherished. Martin found renewed purpose in his work and personal life, volunteering to mentor young professionals struggling with challenges like he once faced. Vicky, too, used her own journey as inspiration, leading seminars on resilience and emotional well-being. Together, they often joked that their love story began in a hospital room and blossomed under the most unlikely circumstances. Dallas thrived in her career, taking lessons from her parents' struggles to build a foundation of honesty in her own relationships. She became a bridge between her mother and father, ensuring that even as their paths diverged, the family remained connected in its own way. As for Diana, time softened the bitterness she once carried. Though she never found the same depth of connection Martin and Vicky shared, she gradually came to terms with her mistakes, finding solace in her role as a mother and a professional. On quiet evenings, Martin and Vicky often sat on their porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. In those moments, they didn't dwell on the past or worry about the future. They simply held hands, grateful for the second chance life had given them, and the strength they found in each other. The oak tree still stood at the corner of Highways 121 and 288, a silent witness to a life's turning point. For Martin, it was no longer a symbol of despair, but a testament to how far he had come.